It is 3 in the morning. The house is still. The world outside is quiet. But in the space behind your eyes, a storm is raging. Thoughts of work, of bills yet to be paid, of a conversation that went wrong, of a mistake made years ago, circle endlessly, one chasing the other. You crave silence, a moment of true rest, but your mind refuses to obey. It feels like a prison, a silent, invisible cage built from your own thoughts. This experience, this quiet desperation in the lonely hours of the night, is one of the most common and unspoken burdens of our modern world. It is not a personal failing. It is a condition of our times. We live in an age of constant stimulation, a world that demands our attention at every moment, a world of endless information and relentless pressure to succeed. This internal chaos has a name, an ancient and fitting description from Buddhist philosophy. It is called the monkey mind. Imagine a monkey in a tree, agitated and restless, leaping from one branch to another, never still for more than a moment. It grabs a fruit, takes one bite, and throws it away to chase a leaf. This is our mind, swinging wildly from a past regret to a future anxiety, from a passing judgment to a sudden desire. We are not in control. We are simply being dragged along on this frantic journey, leaving us feeling exhausted, scattered, and profoundly disconnected from any sense of peace. We are trapped in loops of worry and rumination, leading to sleepless nights and days filled with a low-grade hum of anxiety. But what if this is not an incurable condition? What if it is not a life sentence? Millennia ago, a man named Siddhartha Gautama, who would later be known as the Buddha, grappled with these same fundamental questions of human restlessness and dissatisfaction. The path he discovered was not one of blind faith or religious dogma, but one of profound insight into the workings of the mind. He saw that the way out of the prison was not to fight the walls, but to understand how the prison is built, thought by thought. This journey we are about to embark on is not a sermon. It is an invitation to explore timeless stories, practical wisdom, and ancient tools that can teach us how to gently quiet the storm within, to soothe the tangled threads of our thinking, and to finally touch the deep, abiding peace that we all seek. To begin our journey, we must first give a name to the agitated guest that lives within our minds, the one who keeps us awake in the silent hours of the night. In the language of Zen and Buddhist psychology, this restless, unceasing internal monologue is known as the monkey mind. The image is a powerful one, for it captures the essence of our untamed thoughts perfectly. Picture a monkey, not a calm one, but one that is frantic and perpetually in motion. It swings from the branch of a past memory to the vine of a future worry. It screeches at a perceived slight from a week ago, then chatters endlessly about a task that needs to be done tomorrow. It is never still. It is never silent. It is never satisfied. One ancient Zen master elaborated on this image, describing the mind not just as a monkey, but as a drunken monkey, one that has also been stung by a scorpion. This paints a more accurate picture of the chaos, the pain, and the sheer lack of control we often feel. This internal voice jumps from topic to topic with no discernible logic, pulling our attention along with it, leaving us feeling scattered, drained, and utterly at the mercy of its whims. The first and most crucial understanding we must cultivate is that you are not this monkey. This stream of chatter is not the totality of who you are. It is a function of the mind, a natural activity, much like breathing is a function of the lungs, or beating is a function of the heart. For millennia, the mind has evolved to be a problem-solving tool, constantly scanning the environment for threats and opportunities. This was an essential survival mechanism. The monkey was our protector, warning us of predators in the tall grass, or reminding us where to find food. But in the world we have built for ourselves, this once helpful mechanism has been supercharged into a state of chronic overactivity. The jungle our ancestors navigated was one of trees and predators, a place of intermittent dangers. The jungle we navigate today is one of infinite information, constant social pressure, and unending stimulation. We have taken a mind designed for the savannah and placed it in the middle of a digital Times Square, and we wonder why it screams. Let us look closely at this modern jungle, this perfect habitat for an anxious monkey. Firstly, there is the deluge of information. Our phones, our computers, our televisions, they are portals to a Niagara Falls of data. Every notification, every email, every news alert, every social media post is a new branch for the monkey to leap to. It is a constant call for our attention, fragmenting our focus into 1,000 tiny pieces. Our minds were never designed to process this sheer volume of input. The result is a state of cognitive overload, a mental exhaustion that makes the mind even more susceptible to anxious, repetitive thought loops. We scroll through feeds of tragedy, outrage, and idealized lives, and all of it becomes fuel for the monkey's chatter. Secondly, we have been sold the myth of multitasking. We take pride in our ability to answer an email while on a conference call, while also planning dinner in our heads. But neuroscience tells us that multitasking is not real. What we are actually doing is rapid task switching. We are training our minds to jump and jump and jump again. We are, in essence, sending our monkey mind to the gym. We are building its muscles for distraction. Each time we switch our focus, we are rewarding the monkey for its restlessness. Over time, the state of being scattered feels normal, and the state of focused, single-pointed attention feels alien and difficult. A mind trained in this way finds it nearly impossible to settle into the simple, quiet act of falling asleep. Thirdly, our social environment has become a hall of mirrors. Through the lens of social media, we are constantly exposed to curated, idealized versions of other people's lives. This creates a fertile ground for the monkey mind to cultivate its favorite narratives of comparison, jealousy, and inadequacy. It looks at one person's vacation, another's promotion, another's happy family photo, and it whispers poisonous words into our own ear. You are not good enough. You are falling behind. Your life is lacking. This constant social comparison is a powerful engine for dissatisfaction, and it ensures the monkey always has something negative to chew on, preventing our minds from ever finding a place of contentment and rest. We have created a culture that glorifies being busy, where exhaustion is worn as a badge of honor and stillness is mistaken for laziness. This cultural pressure validates the monkey's frantic pace, telling us that if we are not constantly striving, worrying, and producing, we are failing. So what are we to do? If this monkey is so powerful and its environment so nourishing to its neurosis, how can we ever hope to find peace? The answer, at first, seems counterintuitive. The first step is not to fight the monkey. It is not to try and silence it, cage it, or destroy it. To attempt to do so is to declare war on your own mind, a war you can never win. Trying to suppress a thought is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The moment your concentration wavers, it shoots up with even greater force. Fighting with your mind only creates more noise, more tension, and more suffering. It is like two monkeys screaming at each other instead of one. The true path begins with a simple, yet radical, act recognition. You simply notice that the monkey is there. You become the calm, non-judgmental observer of your own mind. Imagine you are sitting peacefully on the bank of a river, The thoughts, the worries, the memories, they are like leaves, twigs, and branches floating by on the current. Your task is not to jump into the water and try to stop them or redirect them. Your task is simply to watch them float by. A thought of work arises. You see it. It floats past. A memory of an old argument appears. You see it. It floats past. You do not engage. You do not judge. You do not cling. This practice of detached observation is the foundation of mindfulness. You can even give your thoughts simple, one-word labels. When a cascade of worries about the future begins, you can silently note in your mind, worrying, worrying. When your mind starts replaying a past event, you can just note, remembering, remembering. This act of labeling creates a tiny sliver of space between you, the observer, and the thought, the observed. In that space, freedom is born. You begin to realize that thoughts are just thoughts. They are transient mental events, as impersonal as the weather. They are not you, and they are not reality. There is a beautiful story that illustrates this principle. A young, earnest monk went to his master, deeply distressed. "Master," he said, "I cannot control my mind. I sit to meditate, and it runs wild with thoughts. I try to force it to be quiet, but it only becomes more rebellious. I feel like a failure." The master listened with compassion, and then led the young monk to a large, open field. In the field, a magnificent wild horse was galloping freely, its mane flying in the wind. "Your mind is like this horse," the master said. "If you run after it, screaming and trying to throw a rope around its neck, what will happen?" The young monk replied, "It will become frightened and angry, and it will run even faster and fight even harder." "Exactly," said the master. "You cannot tame it with aggression. Instead, you must first build a very large, spacious fence around this entire field. Then, you simply leave the horse alone. Every day, you come and place a bucket of fresh water and some sweet hay in a corner of the field. You do not approach the horse. You simply provide for it and let it be. Over time, the horse will learn that the enclosure is a safe place and that you are a source of kindness, not a threat. Then, slowly, over many months, you can begin to make the enclosure a little smaller. The horse will become so accustomed to the peace and nourishment you provide that it will not even notice the fence is closing in. Eventually, the space will be just large enough, and the horse will be so tame and trusting that it will eat from your hand. You tame it not with force, but with patience, space, and gentle consistency. The master's lesson is profound. Our mind is the wild horse. The attempt to fight it is the foolish act of chasing it across the field. The spacious fence is our initial, non-judgmental awareness. The food and water are our anchor, such as the feeling of our own breath, which we will explore later. Each time we gently return our awareness to our breath, we are offering nourishment to the mind. We are teaching it, with kindness, that there is a place of peace it can return to. We are not caging the monkey. We are building a beautiful, serene grove for it to live in, and in time, it will naturally become calm. This understanding leads us to a fundamental shift in perspective. It is the difference between having a thought and being a thought. Having a thought is a natural, harmless event. It is like seeing a cloud pass in the sky. Being a thought, or being carried away by a thought, is when you climb onto that cloud and let it take you into a turbulent storm, forgetting that you are the vast, open sky in which the cloud is appearing. The practice is to remain as the sky, allowing the clouds to come and go without resistance. By recognizing the monkey mind, we take the first step toward reclaiming our sky. We acknowledge the chaos without becoming it. Now that we have identified this restless presence within us, we must ask a deeper question. Why does its chatter cause us so much pain? What is the fundamental nature of the dissatisfaction it creates? To answer this, we must turn to the first great insight the Buddha had on his own journey to peace. Having recognized the restless monkey that chatters within our minds, we must now turn to face the world it inhabits, the landscape of our own experience. We need to understand the very nature of the dissatisfaction and pain that this monkey so often speaks of. This brings us to the very foundation of the Buddha's teaching, a concept known as the First Noble Truth. In the West, this truth has often been translated in a way that sounds stark, pessimistic, and almost grim. Life is suffering. This translation, however, misses the profound subtlety and compassion of the original idea. It is more accurate, more helpful to understand it as a doctor's diagnosis, not a prophet's curse. The original word used by the Buddha was dukkha. There is no single perfect translation for dukkha in English. It encompasses a whole spectrum of experience, from severe pain to a subtle, underlying sense of unease. Think of it not as a declaration of doom, but as a gentle, honest observation. There is a friction in life. There is a stress. There is an unsatisfactoriness. Imagine a finely crafted wooden cart. Dukkha is the experience of one of the wheels being slightly off-center. The ride is not always terrible. Sometimes it is barely noticeable on a smooth road, but there is always a slight bumpiness, a persistent vibration, a feeling that things are not quite right. The Buddha, like a master physician, is simply pointing to this vibration and saying, "Let us look at this. Let us understand it without fear, so that we may find its cause and ultimately its cure." To face dukkha is not an act of negativity. It is an act of supreme realism and courage. It is the beginning of the end of our denial. The Buddha explained that dukkha manifests in our lives in three distinct, though often overlapping ways. The first is the most obvious and easiest to understand. It is the dukkha of painful experiences, what we might call ordinary suffering. This is the raw, undeniable pain of life. It is the physical pain of sickness, injury, aging, and eventually, death. It is the headache that throbs behind our eyes, the chronic ache in our back, the frailty that comes with the passing years. It is also the sharp sting of emotional and mental pain. It is the grief we feel at the loss of a loved one, the heartbreak of a relationship ending, the fear that grips us in moments of uncertainty, the anger that flares up when we feel wronged, the deep frustration when our plans and efforts fall apart. This is the ouch of existence. No one is immune to it. It is the part of life we actively try to avoid, to numb, to distract ourselves from. The monkey mind is an expert in this domain, constantly replaying past hurts or imagining future pains, amplifying our experience of this ordinary suffering and trapping us in cycles of fear and aversion. Acknowledging this form of dukkha is simply acknowledging a shared, universal truth of being a living, feeling creature. The second form of dukkha is more subtle and in many ways more profound. It is the dukkha of change, or the suffering of impermanence. This is a paradoxical kind of suffering, for it arises not from painful experiences, but from pleasant ones. Every moment of happiness, every peak experience, every joyful connection contains within it the seed of its own ending. The suffering here does not come from the joy itself, but from our clinging to it, our desperate desire to make it permanent in a world where nothing is. Think of a breathtaking sunset, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. It is beautiful, but a part of our mind feels a subtle sadness because we know that in just a few moments, it will fade into darkness. Think of a perfect vacation, a time of blissful relaxation and freedom. The pleasure is often tinged with the knowledge that it is temporary, that soon we must return to our ordinary routines. It is the joy of holding a newborn baby, knowing that this tiny, dependent being will grow and change and one day leave. It is the love for a partner, a friend, or a pet, which is always shadowed by the silent, unspoken truth of eventual separation or loss. This is the suffering of trying to build a permanent home on shifting sands. We grasp and cling to pleasant feelings, beautiful moments, and cherished relationships, trying to freeze them in time. But the nature of reality is flow, is change. The tighter we squeeze, the more we create tension and anxiety for ourselves. The monkey mind is constantly engaged in this futile project, strategizing how to hold on to pleasure and frantically trying to prevent the inevitable changes of life. It lives in fear of losing what it has, and this fear poisons the very happiness it seeks to preserve. The pleasure of a delicious meal is wonderful, but the desperate attempt to make that sensation last forever is a source of dukkha. The joy of success is exhilarating, but the clinging to that status and the fear of its loss is dukkha. By understanding this, we are not being asked to stop enjoying life's pleasures. We are being invited to enjoy them more fully, with an open hand rather than a clenched fist, appreciating them for the beautiful, fleeting gifts that they are, without the added burden of demanding that they last forever. The third and most subtle form of dukkha is perhaps the most pervasive. It is called the dukkha of conditioned existence. This is the background hum of dissatisfaction that permeates our lives, even when nothing is overtly wrong. It is a fundamental sense of incompleteness, a subtle existential friction. It is the feeling of being a self that must be constantly maintained, defended, and propped up. It is the low-grade stress of being a human being in a complex, interdependent world full of conditions we cannot control. It is the vague, nagging feeling that something is missing, that if we could just get that promotion, find that perfect partner, buy that house, or fix that one last flaw in ourselves, then we would finally be truly and permanently happy. But of course, we achieve these things, and after a brief period of satisfaction, the background hum of unease returns. This is the default setting of the monkey mind when it has nothing specific to worry about. It is a general, free-floating anxiety, a sense of being fundamentally unsettled. It is the stress inherent in being a composite, conditioned entity whose very existence depends on countless shifting factors, from the air we breathe, to the food we eat, to the stability of the society around us. Acknowledging this deepest form of dukkha is to acknowledge the inherent vulnerability and instability of our conditioned existence. To illustrate the profound, compassionate power of acknowledging dukkha, especially its universality, there is the ancient and moving story of a woman named Kisa Gautami. She was a young mother in the time of the Buddha, and her entire world revolved around her infant son. One day, the child fell ill and died. Kisa Gautami was consumed by a grief so powerful that it drove her to madness. Denying the reality of his death, she clutched the small, cold body to her chest and wandered from house to house, begging everyone she met for a medicine that could bring her son back to life. Some pitied her, some scorned her, but no one could help. Finally, a wise old man, seeing her desperation, told her, "I cannot give you medicine, but I know a physician who can. Go to the Buddha." Filled with a desperate hope, she ran to find him. She bowed at his feet, presented the body of her son, and pleaded for a cure. The Buddha looked at her with infinite compassion and said, "I can help you, but first, you must do one thing for me. Go back into the village and bring me a single mustard seed from a house where no one has ever died." Kisa Gautami's heart soared. A single mustard seed seemed like such a simple task. She immediately began going from door to door. At the first house, she asked, "The Buddha has sent me to fetch a mustard seed to heal my son. Can you spare one?" The woman of the house replied, "Of course," but as she went to get it, Kisa Gautami remembered the Buddha's condition. "Has anyone in this house ever died?" she asked. The woman's face fell. "Oh, child," she said, "do not remind me of my deepest sorrow. My husband died just last year." Kisa Gautami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. "We have plenty of mustard seeds, but we lost our beloved parent. Take all the seeds you want, but our youngest child was taken from us. The living are few, but the dead are many." As the day wore on and dusk began to settle, Kisa Gautami had not collected a single seed, but in her search, she had found something else. She had found the human family. She sat down at the edge of the village and watched the flickering lights of the lamps being lit in the homes. She realized that her own profound grief was not a singular, isolating curse. It was the shared, universal inheritance of all people. In that moment of profound realization, her personal, frantic suffering was transformed into a deep, compassionate understanding of the nature of life itself. She understood the first noble truth not as a theory, but as a living reality. This is the power of acknowledging dukkha. It is not a path to despair, but the end of isolation. It is the courageous act of looking at life clearly, without the filters of denial or wishful thinking. By seeing the bumpiness of the ride, the pervasiveness of change, and the background hum of unease, we stop blaming ourselves and we stop making impossible demands on life. We have made the diagnosis. We have seen, with clarity and compassion, the nature of our own disease. Now, and only now, can we begin to look for the cure. And the very first instrument in our physician's bag, the first tool we can use to begin working with this unease, is something we carry with us at every moment. It is the gentle, steady, and profound anchor of our own breath. Having faced the courageous diagnosis of dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness and stress woven into the fabric of our lives, we might feel a sense of apprehension if our minds are like restless monkeys, and the very ground we walk on is defined by unease and impermanence. Where can we possibly find solid ground? Where is our refuge in the midst of this storm? The answer is exquisitely simple. So simple that it is overlooked 1,000 times a day. It is closer to you than your own heartbeat. It has been your most faithful companion from the moment of your birth and will be with you until your very last moment. The anchor in the storm, the refuge from the chattering mind, is the breath. The practice of placing our awareness on the breath, known in the ancient Pali language as anapanasati, is the foundation of mental calm and the cornerstone of the path to inner peace. It is the first practical step we can take to move from a life of being constantly tossed about by the waves of our thoughts and emotions to a life of being anchored in the deep, quiet stillness that lies beneath them. The profound power of the breath lies in a simple, immutable fact. It is always and only in the present moment. Your breath is happening right now. You cannot take a breath that is in the past, nor can you take a breath that is in the future. It exists only in this immediate, unfolding instant. Contrast this with the typical activity of the monkey mind. It lives almost exclusively in imaginary worlds. It dwells in the phantom realm of the past, endlessly replaying conversations, ruminating over regrets, and chewing on old grievances. Or it projects itself into the spectral world of the future, rehearsing anxieties, spinning fantasies, and worrying about 1,000 things that may never happen. The mind, lost in these ghosts of time, is completely disconnected from the reality of life as it is actually happening. The genius of breath awareness is that it gently but firmly pulls the mind out of these illusory worlds and plants it back into the soil of the living present. The mind cannot be fully focused on the physical sensation of breathing and simultaneously be lost in a worry about tomorrow. For a moment, the frantic time traveling stops. Think of it as a genuine anchor for a ship. When a storm hits, the waves grow large and violent, the wind howls, and the ship is thrown about mercilessly. These waves are like our thoughts and emotions: fear, anger, worry, desire. A ship without an anchor is completely at the mercy of the storm. It will be driven onto the rocks or swept out into the terrifying abyss of the open ocean. But a ship with an anchor behaves differently. The anchor does not stop the storm. The waves still crash and the wind still blows, but the anchor holds the ship fast to the solid ground of the seabed. It provides stability. It prevents the ship from being lost. The breath is our anchor. Life will continue to produce storms. The monkey mind will continue to generate waves of thought. The practice of returning our awareness to the breath does not magically eliminate these challenges, but it provides us with a place of profound stability in their midst. It allows us to ride out the storm without being capsized. So how do we practice this? The beauty of it is its simplicity. It requires no special equipment, no particular belief system, and it can be done anywhere, at any time. Let us walk through it, step by gentle step. First, you find a posture that embodies both relaxation and dignity. You can sit on a cushion on the floor if you like, but a simple, straight-backed chair works perfectly well. Sit with your spine upright, but not rigid. Allow your shoulders to relax. Let your hands rest comfortably in your lap. The posture itself is a message to the mind. We are here to be awake and aware, but also at ease. Now, you simply invite your attention to rest on the feeling of the breath. Note the word invite. We are not commanding or forcing our attention. We are kindly inviting it to notice the breath. You can choose to focus on one of several places where the sensation is most clear to you. For some, this is the very tip of the nostrils. You can feel the slight coolness of the air as it enters, and the subtle warmth of the air as it leaves. For others, the sensation is more prominent in the chest, feeling the gentle rise and fall with each respiratory cycle. And for others still, the most grounding sensation is in the abdomen, feeling the belly expand softly on the in-breath and gently contract on the out-breath. There is no right or wrong place. Simply choose one spot and allow your awareness to settle there, as if it were a butterfly landing gently on a flower. The next instruction is crucial. You are here to observe, not to control. Your only job is to feel the breath exactly as it is in this moment. You do not need to make it deeper or slower or more even. If the breath is shallow and rapid, you simply notice, the breath is shallow. If it is deep and slow, you notice, the breath is deep. You are becoming a curious, compassionate scientist of your own inner experience. There is no goal to achieve, no perfect breath to attain. The only goal is to be present with what is already here. You just rest your attention on the raw physical sensations of breathing in and breathing out. one breath at a time. Now for the most important instruction of all. At some point, your mind will wander. This is not a guess. It is a guarantee. A thought will arise, a sound will distract you, a memory will surface. The monkey will leap to a new branch. The moment this happens, it is vital to understand that this is not a failure. This is not a mistake. This is simply what minds do. This wandering is part of the practice itself, the truly magical moment. The moment where the practice deepens is the instant you realize you have been distracted. In that moment of realizing, oh, I've been lost in thought, you have already woken up. And what do you do then? You do not sigh in frustration. You do not criticize yourself for failing. Instead, with the utmost gentleness and kindness, as if you were guiding a lost child back home, you acknowledge the thought, perhaps with a soft mental note of thinking, and then you gently, tenderly, guide your awareness back to the physical sensation of the breath. This act of returning, over and over and over again, is the practice. Every gentle return is a repetition, a bicep curl for the muscles of attention and self-compassion. This ancient practice is not just a form of mental training. It has profound physiological benefits that are now well documented by modern science. Our bodies have an autonomic nervous system, which has two main branches. The first is the sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight response. It is our internal accelerator, flooding us with adrenaline and cortisol to prepare us for perceived threats. In our high-stress modern lives, this system is often stuck in the on position. The second branch is the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest response. It is our internal brake, promoting calm, recovery, and healing. The simple, conscious act of observing the breath, especially focusing on a slightly longer out-breath, is one of the most effective ways to manually engage this parasympathetic braking system. It sends a powerful signal from the body to the brain that the threat has passed, that we are safe. As a result, our heart rate slows, our blood pressure decreases, our muscles relax, and the production of stress hormones is reduced. Anchoring in the breath is not just a nice idea. It is a direct intervention that helps to regulate our biology away from a state of chronic anxiety and towards a state of balance and well-being. It tells the monkey that it is safe and it can finally rest. It is said that on the night of his enlightenment, as he sat beneath the Bodhi tree, Siddhartha Gautama was assailed by all the forces of his own untamed mind, personified as the demonic armies of Mara. He was attacked by legions of fear, doubt, greed, lust, and aversion. These are the same forces that create the storms in our own minds. And what was his weapon against this onslaught? It was not some mystical power or divine intervention. His refuge, his shield, and his anchor was his unwavering attention on his own breath. By remaining steadfastly grounded in the reality of the present moment, feeling the air move in and out of his body, he allowed the terrifying armies of his mind to arise, to rage, and to pass away without being swept away by them. He did not fight them. He simply stayed anchored, and the storm eventually exhausted itself, revealing the clear, peaceful sky of his true nature. When we practice in this way, when we find stability in the anchor of the breath, something remarkable begins to happen. As we become more still, we start to see the texture of our own experience with greater clarity. We begin to notice, not just as an intellectual concept, but as a direct, felt experience, that everything is in a state of flux. We watch a thought about work arise in our mind. We feel it for a moment, and then we watch it dissolve and disappear. We feel an itch on our hand, and then it vanishes. We hear a sound, and then there is silence. By anchoring ourselves in the present, we are given a front row seat to witness the most fundamental law of existence. We are beginning to see, directly, the truth of impermanence. As we rest in the quiet stability of the anchored breath, we begin to notice something profound. We are like a person sitting still for the first time in a dense forest. At first, all we notice is the silence, but as we sit longer, we begin to perceive the subtle, constant motion all around us. We hear the rustle of a leaf, see the slow crawl of an insect, feel the gentle shift of the wind. In the same way, from the stillness of our practice, we begin to perceive the fundamental nature of reality itself. We begin to experience, not as a philosophy to be believed, but as a directly felt truth, the first great characteristic of existence, known in the Pali language as anicca, or impermanence. This is not a frightening or negative concept. It is the key that unlocks a radical and liberating new way of relating to our own minds and to the world. It is the wisdom that teaches us how to dance with the river of life, rather than drown in it. Anicca is the universal law of change. It states, quite simply, that everything, without any exception, is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is static, nothing is permanent. Nothing remains the same from one moment to the next. The entire universe is an endless, dynamic process of arising and passing away. On the grandest scale, we see stars being born in fiery nebulas, shining for billions of years, and then collapsing into darkness. We see vast mountain ranges being thrust upwards by tectonic plates, only to be slowly, patiently worn down into sand by the wind and rain. On a more human scale, we witness it in the turning of the seasons, from the green shoots of spring to the full bloom of summer, the decay of autumn, and the deep slumber of winter. A magnificent flower opens its petals to the sun for a few glorious days, and then it withers and returns to the earth. The river we step into today is not the same river we stepped into yesterday. The water is forever new, forever flowing. This law applies most intimately to our own being. Our bodies are a perfect illustration of anicca. We think of them as solid, stable entities, but they are more like a flowing river of processes. Scientists tell us that nearly every cell in our body is replaced over a period of 7 to 10 years. The physical person you were a decade ago literally no longer exists. Our bodies grow, they get stronger, they get weaker, they get sick, they heal, and they age. We cannot stop this process. It is the very definition of being alive. And what is true for the body is even more profoundly true for the mind. Our inner world is the most fleeting, transient, and mercurial aspect of our experience. Think of an emotion, like joy. It can arise, fill our entire being with light, and then, for no apparent reason, it can fade, replaced by a feeling of melancholy. Anger can flare up like a sudden fire, consume us completely, and then vanish, leaving only the cold ash of regret. Our moods shift, like the weather. Our thoughts, as we have seen, are like clouds drifting through the sky of awareness, constantly forming, changing shape, and dissolving. Nothing in our inner landscape is solid or permanent. If this universal law of change is the fundamental nature of reality, then where does our suffering, our dukkha, come from? It does not come from the fact that things change. It comes from our resistance to this fact. It arises from our deep-seated, instinctual desire to grasp, to cling, to hold on to what is pleasant, and to push away, to resist, and to get rid of what is unpleasant. The Buddha used the term upadana, which means clinging or attachment, to describe this root cause of our mental anguish. Imagine standing in the middle of a powerful, flowing river. Annika is the river's current. Clinging is the act of trying to build a permanent dam in the middle of this river with your bare hands. It is an utterly futile, exhausting, and painful struggle against the nature of reality itself. We are constantly trying to freeze the river, to make it conform to our wishes, and the result is a life of struggle, frustration, and disappointment. This struggle plays out in two ways. First, we cling to pleasant experiences. The moment we feel happiness, peace, or pleasure, the monkey mind immediately begins its project of possession. It whispers, "This is wonderful. I need to keep this feeling. How can I make it last? What if it goes away?" This very act of grasping introduces a subtle anxiety and tension into the heart of our joy. We can no longer simply enjoy the beautiful sunset. We are too busy worrying about it ending. We cannot fully savor the delicious meal. We are already lamenting that it will soon be over. We love someone dearly, and that love becomes intertwined with the fear of losing them. Our attempt to make pleasure permanent paradoxically poisons it with the fear of its inevitable impermanence. We are trying to capture the sunbeam in a jar, only to find that in doing so, we have extinguished its light. The second way we struggle is through our aversion to unpleasant experiences. When a difficult emotion like sadness, fear, or anxiety arises, our immediate, instinctual reaction is to push it away. The monkey mind screeches, "I don't like this. This is bad. I need to get rid of this feeling right now." This resistance, this internal no to what is already present, is like struggling in quicksand. The more we fight against the feeling, the more we thrash about in resistance, the deeper we sink into it. We are not only experiencing the initial, unpleasant feeling, the first arrow, but we are now also suffering from our own resistance to it, the second arrow. We add layers of judgment, fear, and frustration on top of the original pain, making it much heavier and more enduring than it needs to be. We treat a temporary weather pattern as if it were a permanent climate, and in doing so, we trap ourselves inside the storm. At first, this teaching of impermanence might sound depressing or nihilistic. If nothing lasts, what's the point? But this is a profound misunderstanding. The wisdom of Annika, when truly understood, is the doorway to liberation and profound joy. If everything is impermanent, it means that our suffering is also not permanent. The darkest moods, the most overwhelming anxiety, the deepest grief, they are all, by their very nature, transient. They are clouds that will eventually pass. The pain you are feeling right now will not last forever. This is not just a hopeful platitude. It is a fundamental law of the universe. This understanding gives us immense strength and courage to endure difficult times. We can learn to sit with our pain without being completely consumed by it, knowing that it too is just a visitor, not a permanent resident. Furthermore, impermanence makes the present moment infinitely precious. If this very moment, this very breath, this specific configuration of sights, sounds, and sensations will never, ever happen again in exactly the same way, it becomes a rare and priceless treasure. When we stop trying to accumulate moments and possess experiences, we can finally learn to participate in them fully. We can truly taste our food, because this taste will never be repeated. We can listen with our whole being to a loved one, because this shared moment is unique and fleeting. We can feel the warmth of the sun on our skin with a sense of gratitude, knowing it is a temporary gift. Annika invites us to let go of our project of building a museum of the past or a fortress for the future, and instead to simply show up for the beautiful, messy, and ever-changing dance of life as it unfolds, moment by moment. There is a timeless story from the Middle East that beautifully captures this wisdom. A great and powerful king, who had known both immense triumph and deep despair, summoned his wisest counselors. He commanded them, "Create for me a ring, and on it, inscribe a message that will serve me in all circumstances. When I am filled with despair, it must give me hope. And when I am lost in the pride of my victories, it must bring me back to earth." The wise men conferred for a long time. Finally, they returned to the king and presented him with a simple, elegant ring. The king looked closely and saw 4 words etched into the metal. The words were, "This too shall pass." The king understood. In his moments of deepest sorrow, he would look at the ring and be reminded that his pain was not eternal. In his moments of greatest joy and ego-inflated triumph, he would look at the ring and be reminded of the transient nature of all worldly success, keeping him humble and balanced. This is the wisdom we can bring to our own restless minds, especially in the dead of night. An anxious thought is not a solid truth. It is not a permanent fixture of who we are. It is simply a phenomenon arising in the mind due to certain conditions. It is anicca. Like a cloud, it appears in the sky of our awareness. It lingers for a while, and if we can learn not to cling to it with fear or fight it with resistance, it will naturally drift on and dissolve. We don't have to believe it. We don't have to engage with it. We can simply note its presence and remember the wisdom of the ring. This too shall pass. As we practice this, as we watch our thoughts, our feelings, and even our physical sensations arise and pass away, a very deep and unsettling question may begin to form in the back of our minds. If my thoughts are always changing, my feelings are always changing, and my body is always changing, then who or what is the I that is witnessing all of this change? If everything is a flowing river, where is the solid self? This profound inquiry leads us directly to the next great insight, the teaching on anatta, the nature of the self. As we rest in the wisdom of impermanence, watching the ceaseless flow of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations, a profound and perhaps unsettling question begins to surface from the depths. We have seen that our bodies are in constant flux, that our feelings are like weather patterns, and that our thoughts are as transient as clouds. If everything we once considered to be me is impermanent, then who or what is the permanent I at the center of this whirlwind of experience? Who is the thinker behind the thought, the feeler behind the feeling? The Buddha's answer to this question is perhaps his most radical, most misunderstood, and most liberating teaching of all. It is the teaching of anatta, which is often translated as no self, or, more helpfully, not self. This teaching does not claim that you do not exist. It does not deny your presence, your consciousness, or your unique life story. Rather, it suggests that you do not exist as a separate, solid, continuous, and independent entity. The self that we feel so viscerally, the ego we work so hard to defend and promote, is not a fixed thing, but a dynamic process. It is not a noun, but a verb. Understanding this is not a step into nothingness. It is the step out of a prison we never knew we were in. To understand what this means, we must look closely at what we call ourself. When you say I, what are you actually referring to? Buddhist psychology suggests that what we call the self is a temporary coalition of 5 distinct, ever-changing processes, known as the 5 aggregates or skandhas. By investigating them one by one, we can see if we can find a permanent, unchanging I anywhere within them. The first aggregate is form, which is our physical body. Is your body the real you? We have already seen that the body is a prime example of anicca, impermanence. It is constantly changing, aging, and is composed of elements that are not us: the food we have eaten, the water we have drunk, the air we have breathed. If you were to lose a limb in an accident, would you be any less you? Of course not. So, the self cannot be equated with the body. The second aggregate is feelings or sensations. These are the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral tones that color our experience from moment to moment. One minute you feel joy, the next you feel irritation, the next you feel a calm neutrality. If you are your feelings, then which one are you? Are you the happiness? If so, where do you go when sadness arises? Feelings are fleeting visitors that pass through the house of our awareness. They are not the owner of the house. Therefore, the self cannot be found in our feelings. The third aggregate is perception. This is the faculty of our mind that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It's the part that says that is a tree, this is a sad song, or that was an insulting comment. Our perceptions are deeply conditioned by our past experiences, our cultural upbringing, our language, and our current mood. Two people can witness the exact same event and have wildly different perceptions of it. Perceptions are not objective truth. They are a conditioned, filtered interpretation. Since they are so variable and dependent on conditions, they cannot be a stable, independent self. The fourth aggregate is mental formations. This is a broad and powerful category that includes all of our thoughts, beliefs, opinions, biases, intentions, desires, and habits. This is the activity of the monkey mind. This is the aggregate we tend to identify with most strongly. We think, I am a kind person, I am a warrior, I am a Democrat, I believe in this and not in that. Yet, are these thoughts and beliefs really who we are? Think of a strong opinion you held 10 years ago that you no longer agree with. Where did that you go? Our thoughts and beliefs are conditioned patterns, often inherited from our parents or society. They arise and pass away. A thought is just a mental event, a momentary flicker of energy in the mind. It is not the solid essence of our being. If we were our thoughts, we would be a different person with every new idea that popped into our head. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness itself. This is the raw faculty of knowing, the basic awareness that makes all other experience possible. There is seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, smelling consciousness, and thinking consciousness. But even this is not a solid, singular entity. Consciousness, in this model, is not a monolithic eye that looks out at the world. It is a function that arises in dependence upon conditions. Seeing consciousness cannot arise without an eye and a visible object. Thinking consciousness cannot arise without a thought. It is part of the flow, arising and ceasing from moment to moment with its objects. It is the light, but not the permanent lamp from which the light shines. So, after this investigation, where is the self? We have looked at the body, the feelings, the perceptions, the thoughts, and even consciousness itself, and we cannot find a single, permanent, independent owner of the house. What we call the self is simply the house itself, the dynamic, interdependent process of these five aggregates flowing together, creating the illusion of a solid occupant. It is like the word river. A river is made of water, a riverbank, a current, and countless other conditions. But there is no separate riverness that exists apart from these components. In the same way, There is no separate selfness that exists apart from the ever-changing flow of the five aggregates. This insight is not just abstract philosophy. It is the key to profound psychological freedom. If there is no fixed, solid self to defend, then who is it that gets offended by a critical comment? Who is it that is terrified of failure? Who is it that is desperately clinging to a positive self-image? It is the ego, this mistaken belief in a separate, vulnerable I. When we take things personally, we are suffering from this case of mistaken identity. The teaching of anatta allows us to loosen the ego's death grip on our experience. It allows for a powerful shift in our relationship to our own thoughts. Instead of thinking, "I am an anxious person," which is a statement of identity, a solid definition of self, we can learn to observe a thought of anxiety is present in the mind. Instead of "I am a failure," we can see the thought "I am a failure" has arisen. This simple shift in language reflects a monumental shift in consciousness. It depersonalizes the pain. The difficult feeling is still there, but it is no longer a direct assault on our core being, because we are beginning to understand that there is no fixed core to be assaulted. It is just weather passing through the vast sky of awareness. There is a classic Zen story that brilliantly illustrates the practical wisdom of anatta. A man decided to spend a quiet afternoon meditating in his small boat on a misty lake. He rowed out to the middle, closed his eyes, and settled into a state of peace. Sometime later, he was suddenly jolted by a loud thud as another boat slammed into his. His eyes flew open, and his peace was instantly shattered by a surge of white-hot rage. He saw the other boat right beside his and began to scream at the person he assumed was in it. "You idiot!" he yelled. "How could you be so careless? Watch where you're going." As he prepared to unleash another torrent of abuse, the mist began to clear, and he saw that the other boat was completely empty. It had simply broken loose from its moorings and drifted silently across the lake. In that instant, all of his anger vanished. It evaporated as quickly as it had appeared. Let us look closely at this story. The event, the collision of the boats, remained exactly the same. The only thing that changed was the man's perception. As long as he believed there was a blameworthy self in the other boat, his anger had a target and seemed completely justified. But the moment he realized the boat was empty, his anger became absurd. There was no one to be angry at. The profound suggestion of this story is that, in a sense, all the boats are empty. The person who cuts you off in traffic is not acting out of a solid, malicious self, but is being driven by their own empty boat of conditioning their stress, their impatience, their distraction. The difficult colleague at work is a confluence of their own fears, insecurities, and habits. When we take these events personally, we are like the man yelling at an empty boat. The teaching of anatta invites us to see the emptiness in all situations, to see the impersonal, conditioned processes at play rather than a solid self to blame. This doesn't mean we become passive doormats, but it does mean we can act with wisdom and compassion rather than blind, reactive anger. Many of the anxious, self-critical thoughts that bump into our own minds are also just empty boats, drifting from the murky shores of our past conditioning. To understand anatta is not to deny our humanity, but to embrace it more fully, with more lightness and resilience. It is to finally put down the impossibly heavy burden of maintaining and defending a fragile, fictitious self. When we are not so busy protecting this imaginary identity, we become more open, more curious, and far more compassionate, both to ourselves and to others. We can participate in life's joys and sorrows without everything being a referendum on our personal worth. This insight that our suffering comes not from the event itself, but from our personalized reaction to it, from yelling at what we perceive to be an occupied boat, leads us to a crucial new line of inquiry. We must look more closely at the nature of our reactions. What, precisely, is the difference between the initial bump of the boat and the rage that follows? This leads us directly to the powerful parable of the second arrow. As we begin to see through the illusion of a solid, permanent self, we arrive at a place of profound practical importance. We have seen that much of our distress comes from personalizing impersonal events, like the man yelling at the empty boat. This opens up a crucial question. If pain in life is unavoidable, is our suffering about that pain truly necessary? The Buddha answered this with one of his most powerful and accessible teachings, a parable that serves as a master key for navigating the difficulties of human existence. It is the parable of the second arrow. This simple story offers us a clear, compassionate, and life-altering distinction between pain and suffering. And it shows us that while we may not have a choice about our pain, we have a profound choice when it comes to our suffering. It teaches us that the path to peace is not about building a life free from hardship, but about learning how to stop wounding ourselves. Let us first understand the nature of the first arrow. The first arrow represents the unavoidable, unpleasant, and painful events of life. They are the raw, objective experiences that are an intrinsic part of being alive in an impermanent, conditioned world. First arrows are a given. They are the price of admission for a human life. A first arrow could be a physical pain, the sharp sting of a paper cut, the dull throb of a migraine headache, the diagnosis of a chronic illness, or the inevitable aches and pains of an aging body. It could be an emotional pain, the pang of disappointment when something doesn't go our way, the sting of a harsh criticism from someone we respect, the gut-wrenching grief of losing a loved one, or the wave of anxiety that washes over us before a public speech. It could be a situational pain, getting stuck in a traffic jam when you are already late, spilling coffee on your shirt right before an important meeting, losing a job, or facing a financial crisis. These are the 10,000 sorrows that balance the 10,000 joys of existence. No amount of meditation, positive thinking, or careful planning can make us completely immune to these first arrows. They will happen to all of us. The crucial insight of the Buddha's teaching, however, lies in what happens next. For most of us, the moment we are struck by a first arrow, we unconsciously and automatically reach back into our own quiver and shoot ourselves with a second one. The second arrow represents our reaction to the first. It is the suffering we create on top of the initial pain. It is the story we tell ourselves about the first arrow. It is the judgment, the blame, the self-pity, the anger, the fear, and the rumination that we pile on top of the clean, simple pain of the initial event. And this second arrow, the one we shoot ourselves, is almost always far more painful, far more damaging, and lasts far longer than the first. Let's look at this in practice. Imagine you are rushing in the morning, and you stub your toe hard against a piece of furniture. The first arrow is the immediate, sharp, physical pain. It is intense, but it is just a raw sensation. It will likely begin to fade within a few minutes. The second arrow, however, sounds like this. You idiot! I can't believe you did that. Why are you so clumsy? This always happens to me. I'm so stupid. Now my whole day is ruined. I'm going to be late. Everything is going wrong. This is a volley of second arrows. Self-criticism, anger, catastrophic thinking, and generalization. The physical pain in your toe might last for 5 minutes, but this feeling of being an incompetent, clumsy person whose day is ruined can linger for hours, poisoning your mood and your interactions. The suffering from the second arrows far outweighs the pain of the first. Consider another example. You give a presentation at work, and your boss later gives you some critical feedback. The first arrow is the emotional sting of the criticism. It feels unpleasant. It is a moment of social pain. The second arrows begin to fly immediately. She thinks I'm incompetent. I probably am. I'm going to get fired. Everyone on the team probably thinks I'm a fraud. I can't do anything right. I should never have spoken up in the first place. Here, the second arrows are fear, shame, personalization, and fortune-telling. The first arrow was a single event, a moment of feedback. The second arrows create a whole narrative of personal failure and impending doom. You might go home that night and lie awake, the monkey mind replaying the conversation over and over. Each replay another shot from the second arrow, digging the wound deeper and deeper. The second arrow is the difference between feeling pain and creating a story of suffering. It is the difference between there is a sensation of physical pain in my back and my back is ruined. It's so unfair. Why me? I'll never be able to play with my kids again. My life is over. The first statement acknowledges the reality of the first arrow. The second statement is a barrage of self-inflicted wounds, each one filled with the poison of despair, self-pity, and fear. We do this so automatically, so habitually, that we don't even realize we are the ones holding the bow. So how do we learn to put the bow down? How do we stop this cycle of self-injury? The answer lies in cultivating the space of mindfulness. Mindfulness, as we have explored, is the gentle, non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. It acts as a circuit breaker in our habitual reactivity. It creates a sacred pause, a precious gap in time and space between the impact of the first arrow and the automatic launching of the second. In that gap, a choice is born. Without mindfulness, the first arrow hits and the second arrow flies in the same seamless, unconscious motion. But with mindfulness, we can learn to feel the impact of the first arrow and simply stay with it, just for a moment, without doing anything else. We feel the throb in our toe, and we just breathe. We feel the sting of criticism, and we notice the heat rising in our chest, and we just breathe. We feel the wave of sadness, and we allow it to be there, without immediately telling ourselves a story about why it's wrong or how we must get rid of it. This is not easy. It requires a great deal of courage to stay with the clean pain of the first arrow. Our every instinct screams at us to react, to do something, to blame, to analyze, to fix, to escape. But the practice is to gently resist that impulse and to simply allow the raw sensation of the first arrow to be what it is, knowing from our understanding of anicca that it too will pass. When we do this, we can watch with a kind of detached curiosity as the mind reaches for its quiver. We can see the impulse to anger arise. We can see the temptation to feel sorry for ourselves bubble up. But because we are watching it from this space of awareness, we don't have to identify with it. We don't have to act on it. We can let that impulse arise and pass away, just like any other thought or feeling. In the ancient scriptures, in a text called the Salata Sutta, the Buddha explains this principle to his monks with beautiful clarity. He asks them, if a man is struck by an arrow, is it painful? The monks reply that yes, it is painful. The Buddha then asks, if that man is then struck by a second arrow in the very same spot, is it not even more painful? The monks agree that it is doubly painful. The Buddha then explains, so it is with the uninstructed, ordinary person. When touched by a painful feeling, he sorrows, he grieves, he laments, he beats his breast and becomes distraught. So he feels two pains, one physical and one mental. It is as if he were to be struck by an arrow and then to be struck by another arrow. He continues, but in the case of the well-instructed, noble disciple, when touched by a painful feeling, he does not sorrow, grieve, or lament. He does not beat his breast or become distraught. So he feels one pain, the physical, but not the mental. It is as if he were to be struck by an arrow, but was not then struck by another arrow. This is the heart of the practice. We cannot control all the first arrows that life will shoot at us. We are all vulnerable to the arrows of sickness, loss, and disappointment. But the second arrow is our arrow. We carry it in our own quiver. We fit it to our own bow. We pull back the string, and we let it fly. The great liberation is the realization that we can choose not to. We can learn to feel the pain of the first arrow with compassion and acceptance, and let it be just that, a painful sensation that will, in time, pass. True peace is not found in a magical life free from all pain, but in the profound and empowering wisdom of laying down our own bow. One of the primary ways we notch and fire these second arrows is through the stories we tell, the judgments we make, and the harsh labels we apply. The very language we use becomes the fletching and the poisoned tip of our arrows. This leads us directly to the crucial role that our words, especially the words we speak to ourselves, play in creating our own suffering. We have seen how we torment ourselves with the second arrow, adding layers of mental suffering to the unavoidable pain of life. Now we must ask, what is this second arrow made of? How is it constructed? If you look closely, you will find that it is fashioned almost entirely out of language. It is built from the stories we tell, the harsh judgments we make, and the cruel labels we apply to ourselves and our experiences. Our words, both the ones we speak aloud and, more importantly, the ones that echo endlessly in the private chamber of our own minds, are the primary tools we use to wound ourselves. This brings us to a cornerstone of the Buddhist path, an element of the Noble Eightfold Path known as samaveka, or right speech. Often, we think of this as a simple ethical guideline. Don't lie, don't use harsh words, don't gossip. And while it is all of those things, its deepest and most transformative application begins much closer to home. It begins with the way you speak to yourself. The internal dialogue you have is the most continuous and influential speech in your entire life. It is the soundtrack to your existence, and for many of us, that soundtrack is a relentless torrent of criticism, judgment, and abuse. Living inside most human minds is a powerful and persuasive voice, a figure we can call the inner critic. This is the inner narrator who is never satisfied, the relentless judge who presides over the courtroom of your mind, always finding you guilty. Its tone is often sharp, dismissive, and cruel. Its sole purpose seems to be to point out your flaws, magnify your failures, and invalidate your successes. It is the voice that whispers, "You're not good enough," right after you've achieved something. It's the voice that screams, "You're so stupid," after you've made a simple mistake. It constantly compares you to others, always finding you lacking. It sees other people's curated highlight reels on social media and presents them as evidence for your own inadequacy. It is a master of cognitive distortions, taking a single negative event and turning it into a permanent character flaw. If you fail at one task, the critic doesn't say, "You failed at that task." It says, "You are a failure." This inner critic is the primary archer of the second arrow. The moment a first arrow strikes a mistake, a rejection, a moment of weakness, the inner critic is there, instantly, with a quiver full of poisoned darts. Where does this voice come from? It is not an intrinsic part of you. It is a learned behavior, an internalized script. For many, It is the recorded voice of a critical parent, a demanding teacher, or a culture that worships perfection and productivity. It believes, in its own misguided way, that its job is to protect you. It thinks that by being harsh, it can motivate you to do better and prevent you from making future mistakes. But its methods are brutal, and its results are toxic. The inner critic doesn't lead to growth. It leads to chronic stress, anxiety, shame, and paralysis. It is the engine of our suffering, the voice that keeps us small and afraid, the jailer of our own hearts. Taming this voice is one of the most profound acts of self-love and liberation we can undertake. The path to taming the inner critic is the practice of applying the principles of right speech to our own internal dialogue. Traditionally, right speech is said to have 4 qualities, and we can use these as 4 gates through which we filter our own self-talk. The first gate is it true? The inner critic is a notorious liar. It deals in gross exaggerations and black and white thinking. When it tells you, you mess everything up, you can gently pause and ask, is that really true? Have I messed up everything in my entire life? Or did I just make a mistake in this one instance? By challenging its dramatic pronouncements with simple, objective reality, we begin to dismantle its credibility. We see it not as a source of truth, but as a source of hyperbole. The second, and perhaps most important gate for this inner work is it kind? This is a revolutionary question to ask of our own thoughts. The next time you hear the inner critic's harsh voice, pause and ask yourself this simple question. Would I ever talk to a dear friend who was going through this exact same situation in this way? The answer, for almost everyone, is a resounding no. We would never dream of telling a friend who just made a mistake that they are a worthless failure. We would offer them comfort, perspective, and encouragement. This question brilliantly exposes the shocking cruelty we routinely inflict upon ourselves. It highlights the profound double standard we have for our treatment of others versus our treatment of ourselves. The realization that we are speaking to ourselves in a way we would never speak to anyone else is often the first step toward changing that habit. The third gate is it beneficial or helpful? The inner critic justifies its existence by claiming it is trying to help, to motivate you. But is its strategy effective? Does being called stupid and worthless actually inspire you to learn and grow? Or does it make you feel ashamed, afraid to try again, and paralyzed by the fear of failure? When we look honestly at the results, we see that the critic's methods are a complete failure. They do not lead to positive change. They lead to suffering. True motivation, the kind that is sustainable and healthy, is born from encouragement, clarity, and self-compassion, not from fear and self-loathing. By seeing that the critic's speech is not beneficial, we remove its primary justification for existing. The fourth gate is it spoken at the right time? Even speech that is true and well-intentioned can be harmful if spoken at the wrong time. Imagine you have just had a terrible day and you are feeling fragile and exhausted. Is that the right moment for a deep, analytical dive into all of your character flaws? Of course not. The inner critic, however, loves to attack when we are at our most vulnerable, when we are tired, sick, or trying to fall asleep. The practice of right speech includes the wisdom of right timing. It means learning to tell our inner critic, "Thank you for your input, but now is not the time for this. Right now, what is needed is rest and kindness." The antidote, then, to the inner critic is the active cultivation of a new inner voice, the voice of self-compassion. This is the practice of learning to speak to yourself as you would to a dear friend. At first, this can feel artificial, even silly. because the habit of self-criticism is so deeply ingrained. But with practice, it can become our new nature. Try this. Recall a recent time when you made a mistake or felt that you failed in some way. Remember the feelings of shame or frustration. Now, imagine that a beloved friend comes to you and tells you they have just gone through the exact same experience. What would you say to them? You would likely say things like, "Oh, that sounds so hard. Please don't be so tough on yourself. Everyone makes mistakes. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time. This doesn't define you." The practice is to then take those exact words of kindness and comfort and gently offer them to yourself. It is the practice of reparenting yourself with the compassion and unconditional support you may have always needed. It is not about making excuses or avoiding responsibility. It is about creating an inner environment of safety and support, which is the only ground from which true learning and growth can occur. The Buddha told a story that offers a powerful strategy for dealing with this onslaught of internal and external criticism. One day, a man came to see the Buddha and began to hurl all manner of insults and abuse at him. The Buddha listened patiently and silently until the man had exhausted himself. Then, he asked a simple question. "My friend," he said, "if you buy a gift for someone, and that person does not accept your gift, to whom does the gift then belong?" The angry man, taken aback, thought for a moment and replied, "Well, it would belong to me, the one who bought it." The Buddha smiled gently and said, "Exactly. So it is. With your anger and your insults, you have offered them to me today, but I do not accept them." This is a profound teaching. Our inner critic is constantly offering us these toxic gifts of shame, fear, and self-hatred. For most of our lives, we have been unconsciously accepting them, believing they belong to us. The practice of mindfulness and right speech gives us the ability to see the gift being offered and to politely refuse it. When the thought "you are a failure" arises, we can see it and say, "I see you, but I do not accept this gift today." By learning to speak to ourselves with truthfulness, and most importantly, with kindness, we are disarming the archer of the second arrow. We are changing the very soundtrack of our lives, from one of a harsh taskmaster to one of a trusted friend. Our words literally create our world, and by cultivating a kinder inner landscape, we find that our experience of the outer world becomes more spacious, more gentle, and infinitely more peaceful. We have just explored right speech, a powerful tool from the Buddhist path. But like any tool, even this can be misused. What happens if we become attached to the practice itself? What if our attempts to be mindful and compassionate become another source of striving and self-judgment? This leads us to a subtle but essential wisdom. The wisdom of knowing when to let go of even the most precious teachings, lest they become another burden to carry. We have now gathered a number of powerful tools for our journey. We have learned to recognize the restless monkey mind, to diagnose the nature of our unease, to anchor ourselves in the breath, to see the impermanent nature of all things, to deconstruct the myth of a solid self, to avoid the sting of the second arrow, and to tame the harsh voice of the inner critic through right speech. These concepts and practices are immensely valuable, but like any tool, their usefulness depends entirely on how we use them. A hammer can be used to build a beautiful home, or it can become a heavy, useless burden if we simply carry it around everywhere we go, admiring its weight and form without ever using it for its intended purpose. On the spiritual path, there is a subtle but profound danger of falling in love with the tools themselves, of becoming so attached to the methods and ideas that we forget their ultimate purpose. The Buddha, with his characteristic foresight and psychological genius, warned against this very pitfall in a beautiful and enduring story, the parable of the raft. The Buddha asks us to imagine a person on a long journey. After walking for many days through a difficult landscape, they arrive at the edge of a great and treacherous body of water. The shore where they stand is filled with danger, fear, and uncertainty. It is a place of suffering. The far shore, which they can see in the distance, is a place of safety, security, and peace. It is the end of suffering. But there is no bridge to cross this vast expanse of water, and there is no ferryman to carry them over. The person is wise and resourceful. They think to themselves, this body of water is vast, and the near shore is perilous, while the far shore is safe. What if I were to gather grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, and bind them all together to construct a raft? Then, relying on that raft and striving with my hands and feet, I could cross over safely to the other side. And so, they set to work. They gather all the necessary materials and skillfully bind them together, creating a sturdy, buoyant raft. Then, with great effort and perseverance, they launch the raft into the water and begin to paddle. They paddle through the currents and the waves, their eyes fixed on the safe shore. Finally, they arrive. They have crossed the dangerous river and now stand on the far shore, the land of peace and security. Now, standing on the far shore, the person looks back at the raft that served them so well. They think, this raft has been of great service to me. Relying on it and striving with my hands and feet, I have crossed over safely. It is a precious and valuable thing. What if I were to now hoist this raft onto my head or carry it on my shoulders as I continue my journey on land? The Buddha then asks his disciples, what do you think? By doing so, would that person be acting rightly with regard to the raft? The disciples replied, no, Lord. The Buddha then explains what the wise course of action would be. The person would reflect, this raft was truly helpful, but its purpose has now been fulfilled. It was built for crossing the river, not for being carried on land. And so, they would either beach the raft on the shore, allowing it to be used by another traveler, or they would push it back into the water to float away, and then they would continue their journey onward, unburdened. Having told this story, the Buddha delivered its crucial punchline. In the same way, monks, I have taught the Dhamma teachings as being like a raft, for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of being held onto and clung to. You who understand the simile of the raft should let go even of the teachings, let alone the things that are contrary to the teachings. This simple parable is a profound warning against a subtle trap on the spiritual path, a trap we can call spiritual materialism. It is the tendency of the ego, that sense of a separate self, to co-opt spiritual practices and concepts for its own purposes. The ego is a master of survival, and when it sees its old identities starting to dissolve, it can cleverly construct a new, spiritual identity to cling to. The near shore in the parable is our ordinary state of suffering, the land of dukkha, ruled by the anxious monkey mind. The vast river is samsara, the endless cycle of grasping and aversion, of reactivity and confusion. The far shore is nibbana, or nirvana, which is not a physical place, but a state of being, a state of profound peace, freedom, and liberation from the root causes of suffering. And the raft, of course, is the entirety of the Buddhist path. All the practices of meditation, all the wisdom teachings on impermanence and not self, all the ethical guidelines like right speech. These are the twigs and branches we gather to help us cross the turbulent river of our own confusion. The danger is that we can become so enamored with our raft that we forget its purpose. We can spend all our time polishing it, decorating it, and comparing it to other people's rafts, without ever actually getting in and paddling. This is the person who reads countless books on Buddhism, who can quote all the scriptures, who can debate the finer points of philosophy for hours, but whose daily life is still filled with anger, anxiety, and impatience. They have become a connoisseur of rafts, but they are still standing on the dangerous shore. They are clinging to the concepts, but they are not using them to transform their hearts. Another way we carry the raft is by developing a spiritual ego. The ordinary ego finds identity in things like wealth, status, or appearance. The spiritual ego finds identity in being spiritual. It thinks, I am a great meditator. I have been practicing for 10 years. I am more mindful than those other people. I have a deeper understanding of the teachings. The content of the ego has changed from material to spiritual, but the underlying structure of pride, comparison, and separation remains exactly the same. The raft, which was meant to be a tool for dissolving the self, has now become the primary building material for a new, improved, and even more subtle version of the self. This is a heavy burden to carry. It creates a new kind of striving and anxiety. Am I meditating correctly? Am I making enough progress? Am I being mindful enough? The path, which should lead to lightness and freedom, becomes a new source of pressure and self-judgment. Furthermore, clinging to the raft can lead to a rigid dogmatism. We can become so convinced that our raft, our particular set of techniques, or our school of thought, is the one and only true raft. We look with suspicion or judgment on those who are building their rafts differently. The teachings, which are meant to be a flexible guide, become a set of inflexible rules. The finger pointing at the moon becomes more important than the moon itself. This is a tragic misapplication of the Dhamma. The Buddha's teachings are practical, pragmatic, and meant to be adapted to the individual. They are a prescription for healing, not a creed to be blindly believed. So what does it mean to leave the raft on the shore? It does not mean we become lazy, that we abandon the practices, or that we forget the teachings. On the contrary, it means the teachings have become so deeply integrated into our very being that we no longer need to consciously think about them. It is the difference between a student driver who is rigidly following a checklist check, the mirror, signal, turn the wheel, and an experienced driver who navigates a curve smoothly and intuitively. It is the difference between a musician laboriously reading notes on a page and a master who improvises freely from the heart. The wise person leaves the raft behind because they have learned how to swim. The teachings are no longer an external set of instructions they are following, but have become their natural way of moving through the world. The kindness of right speech has become their default way of thinking. The stability of the anchored breath is their natural state of being. The wisdom of impermanence informs their every perception. They are no longer carrying the raft because they have become the embodiment of its purpose. This parable invites us to hold our spiritual practice with a light and skillful touch. It encourages us to use the techniques with diligence and sincerity, but to never forget that they are a means to an end. The goal is not to become a perfect meditator. The goal is to become a free and compassionate human being. Having learned this crucial lesson in non-clinging, understanding that even the path itself can become a burden if held too tightly, we can now turn our attention to a practice that is less about negation and letting go, and more about active, positive cultivation. It is a practice that is designed to warm the heart and to counteract the cold, constricting habits of fear, resentment, and anger. We can now explore the boundless, healing power of metta, the practice of universal loving kindness. While it is wise not to cling to the raft of teachings, to understand that they are merely tools for crossing the river. There is one practice so powerful, so transformative, that its cultivation becomes a healing path in itself. It is a practice that does not focus on removing the negative, but on actively, intentionally cultivating the positive. It is the practice of developing a boundless heart, of tending to the garden of the mind, so that flowers of kindness may bloom where the weeds of anger and fear once grew. This is the path of metta, a word often translated as loving kindness or compassion, but which truly signifies a universal, unconditional friendliness toward all of existence, starting with yourself. In a world that often feels cold and alienating, where our minds are conditioned for judgment and defense, metta is a radical act of warmth. It is the antidote to the poisons that we so often carry, the resentment, the jealousy, the bitterness, and the deep, abiding fear. Anger and fear are states of contraction. When you are angry, your body tenses, your jaw clenches, your mind narrows to a single point of perceived injustice. When you are afraid, your world shrinks to the size of the threat. These emotions build walls. They create a sense of me against them, a fortress of self that must be perpetually defended. Metta does the opposite. It is an act of expansion. It is the intentional dismantling of these walls, not through force, but through the gentle, persistent application of warmth. It is the recognition that behind every face, within every being, is the same fundamental wish that you hold in your own heart, the wish to be safe, to be happy, to be free from suffering. The practice of metta is a form of meditation, but it does not require an empty mind. Instead, it gives the mind a beautiful, wholesome task. The practice is structured, a systematic training of the heart, and it begins in the most difficult and most important place of all, with yourself. For many of us, especially in a culture that champions relentless self-improvement and flags any form of self-care as selfish, this is the highest hurdle. We are masters of self-criticism. That inner voice, that relentless judge, is always ready to list our flaws, to remind us of our past mistakes, to tell us that we are not good enough, not worthy of kindness, not deserving of peace. And so, the first step of metta is a direct, gentle rebellion against this inner tyranny. You sit quietly and you turn your attention inward, and you offer yourself the very wishes you would offer to a beloved friend in pain. You repeat the simple, powerful phrases, letting them resonate in your heart. May I be safe. May I be free from inner and outer harm. May I be happy. May I find true, lasting happiness. May I be healthy. May I be free from physical and mental illness. May I live with ease. May I accept life as it is and live with peace and tranquility. At first, this can feel mechanical, even fraudulent. The inner critic may scream in protest, calling you selfish or ridiculous. You may feel nothing at all. This is normal. The instruction is not to feel overwhelming love for yourself, but to simply, patiently, and persistently offer the intention. You are planting seeds. For years, you have planted seeds of self-judgment, and they have grown into a thick, thorny forest. Now, you are planting new seeds. You water them with your repetition, with your gentle intention. You don't fight the weeds. You simply give your energy to the flowers. The reason this step is so fundamental is that you cannot pour from an empty cup. If your own heart is a desolate landscape of self-recrimination, any compassion you try to offer to others will be strained. It might be tinged with a need for their approval, a desire to be seen as a good person, or a subtle form of pity that reinforces your own sense of superiority. true. Unconditional compassion for others can only flow from a source of self-acceptance. When you can wish yourself peace, you can genuinely wish others peace. When you can forgive your own imperfections, you can begin to have patience for the imperfections of others. You must first tend to the wounds within your own heart before you can truly become a healer in the world. Once you have established a foundation of kindness for yourself, even if it feels fragile, you begin to expand the circle. The next step is to bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend, someone for whom you already feel natural warmth and appreciation. It could be a family member, a cherished mentor, or even a beloved pet. Holding their image in your mind, you now direct the phrases of metta toward them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. This part is often easier. The heart opens more readily, and you can feel the genuine warmth of the wish. The purpose here is to strengthen the muscle of loving kindness, to let it flow through an open channel so you can recognize what it feels like. You rest in this feeling, letting the goodwill saturate your awareness. Then, the practice takes another step, outward, into territory we often ignore. You bring to mind a neutral person. This is someone you see in your daily life, but have no strong feelings about, positive or negative. It could be the cashier at the grocery store, the person who delivers your mail, the driver in the car next to you at a stoplight. You hold this person in your mind, a person with their own life, their own private joys and secret sorrows, their own hopes and fears, and you offer them the same phrases. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. This is a profound step. It begins to break down the artificial categories our minds create, the walls of indifference that separate me from the anonymous crowd. You start to see the shared humanity that connects you to every stranger. You recognize that they too, just like you, and just like your dearest friend, simply want to be happy. The world begins to feel less like a collection of disconnected objects, and more like a web of interconnected hearts. Finally, the practice reaches its most challenging and most transformative stage. You are asked to bring to mind a difficult person. It is wise to start with someone who is only mildly irritating, not the source of your deepest trauma. Perhaps it is a coworker who is consistently frustrating, or a neighbor who is inconsiderate. Holding them in your mind, you attempt to offer them the very same wishes. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. The mind will almost certainly rebel. It will cry out, "They don't deserve it. They are the cause of my suffering." And here lies the deepest teaching of metta. This practice is not for them. It is for you. It is not about condoning their harmful actions or forcing yourself to like them. It is about your own liberation. Holding on to anger, resentment, and hatred is like holding a hot coal in your hand with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. It is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. This final stage of metta is the act of dropping the hot coal, of putting down the poison. You do this by trying to see the suffering behind their actions. You recognize that their harmful behavior comes from their own pain, their own ignorance, their own confusion. A truly happy and peaceful person does not cause harm to others. So, in wishing them to be happy and free from suffering, you are making the most profound wish of all. You are wishing for them to become the kind of person who no longer causes suffering to themselves or to anyone else. It is an act of supreme emotional intelligence, a way to reclaim the power they have over your inner peace. There is a powerful story that illustrates this boundless compassion. In the community of monks, there was one man named Putigata Tissa, whose body was afflicted with a terrible disease. His skin broke out in oozing, foul-smelling sores, and his robes became stuck to his body with pus and blood. He was in constant agony. The other monks, overcome by disgust and fear of contagion, would not go near him. They left him utterly alone in his misery. One day, the Buddha was walking through the monastery, surveying the monks' quarters, when he came upon the dwelling of this sick monk. He heard the cries of pain and smelled the sickness. Without hesitation, he entered. Seeing the monk's wretched state, the Buddha went to the fire and boiled a pot of water. He then returned to the monk and, with his own hands, began to gently wash the man's body, loosening the stuck robes, cleaning the sores, and applying medicine. After he had washed the monk and given him clean robes, he helped him up and laid him down comfortably. Then the Buddha gathered the other monks together. He did not scold them with anger. He simply asked them, "Why have you abandoned this brother?" They remained silent in their shame. The Buddha then spoke one of the most powerful teachings on compassion. "Monks, you have no mother and no father to care for you here. If you do not care for one another, who else will? Whoever would tend to me should tend to the sick." In that moment, he dissolved the illusion of separation. To care for the sickest, most wretched person among them, was the same as caring for the enlightened one himself. Compassion, he taught, is not selective. It does not ask if a person is pleasant or deserving. It responds only to the presence of suffering. This story reveals that compassion is not a mere feeling, but a skill, a capacity of the heart that can be trained and developed through consistent practice. Modern science is beginning to confirm this ancient wisdom, showing that practices like loving kindness, meditation, can change the neural pathways in our brains, strengthening centers associated with empathy, emotional regulation, and happiness. This is why it is called a practice. You are not expected to be perfect. You are simply asked to show up, to sit down, and to gently set the intention. Some days, the heart will feel open and warm. Other days, it will feel like a cold, hard stone. It does not matter. You do the practice anyway. You repeat the phrases. You plant the seeds of kindness for yourself, for your loved ones, for the neutral person, and even for the one who has caused you pain. In doing so, you are performing a quiet alchemy upon your own heart, transforming the lead of resentment and fear into the gold of a free and boundless love. This practice of compassion anchors us firmly in a kinder present, loosening the chains of past grievances. But what of the other direction in which our mind so often flees? What of the endless anxieties for a future that has not yet arrived? Many of our most tangled thoughts are born from this very tension, the heavy burden of carrying both yesterday and tomorrow on our shoulders. The practice of compassion anchors us in a kinder present, loosening the chains of past grievances. But our minds are restless travelers, and when they are not wandering through the haunted corridors of the past, they are venturing into the misty, unformed landscapes of the future. The human mind has a powerful, almost gravitational, tendency to live in one of two places, neither of which is real. It lives in yesterday, or it lives in tomorrow. The present moment, the only place where life actually occurs, is often just a brief, overlooked layover. To live in the past is to walk through life constantly looking over your shoulder. You carry a heavy sack filled with stones, and each stone has a name. This one is called regret. This one is called a mistake. This one is a conversation you wish you could have again, a path you didn't take, an injury you received, a hurt you inflicted. The events themselves are long gone, as ephemeral as smoke, but you keep them alive by replaying the stories in your mind. You relitigate old arguments in the shower, You feel the flush of embarrassment over something you said 10 years ago. You nurture the cold ember of a grudge, blowing on it with your thoughts to keep it from dying out. You are not living in the present. You are living in a museum of your own history, and the price of admission is your peace of mind. Or perhaps your mind prefers to travel in the other direction. To live in the future is to exist in a perpetual state of what if. It is to be a constant scriptwriter for a movie that will never be produced exactly as you imagine it. This is the realm of anxiety and expectation. You rehearse for meetings that haven't happened. You worry about bills that are not yet due. You anticipate catastrophes that will likely never occur. You build elaborate fantasies of success and happiness, pinning all your hopes on a future event, a promotion, a relationship, a vacation, believing that then, and only then, will you finally be able to rest and be at peace. You are trying to stand on ground that has not yet formed, attempting to control a time that does not exist and can never be truly controlled. This mental projection poisons the present moment. You cannot enjoy the simple meal in front of you because you are worried about tomorrow's workload. You cannot listen fully to your child because you are planning your response to an email you have yet to receive. In both cases, whether dwelling in the past or grasping for the future, you are sacrificing the only reality you ever have for the sake of a ghost or a dream. The most profound and liberating truth is also the simplest. The only time you are ever alive is now. The real power, the only true agency you possess, lies in your ability to bring your awareness back to this very moment. This is not a philosophical abstraction. It is a tangible, felt experience. It is the feeling of air filling your lungs right now. It is the sensation of the chair supporting your body right now. It is the sound of a distant siren or the hum of a refrigerator happening right now. This is reality. The past and future are thoughts happening in the present. They are mental events, not actual places. When you remember a past hurt, the pain you feel is happening now. When you worry about a future event, the anxiety you feel is happening now. The trick of the mind is to make us believe that the content of these thoughts is more real than the moment in which they are occurring. To reclaim your life is to learn to unhook your awareness from the content of the thought stream and anchor it in the direct sensory reality of the here and now. Every time you consciously notice your breath, you are stepping out of the noisy, chaotic cinema of mental time travel and into the quiet, vivid reality of your own life. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates this human tendency to carry what is already gone. Two monks, one senior and one junior, were on a long journey on foot. Their monastic code was very strict, and among its many rules was a prohibition against touching a woman. As they walked, they came to a river where the recent rains had washed away the bridge. The current was strong, and the riverbed was a mess of thick, deep mud. On the bank stood a beautiful young woman in a fine silk kimono, hesitating. She was clearly distressed, unable to cross without ruining her clothes and risking being swept away by the current. The junior monk, seeing her, immediately averted his eyes and prepared to wade across, his mind filled with the rules. The senior monk, however, looked at the woman, saw her predicament, and without a word, walked over to her. He effortlessly lifted her into his arms, carried her across the swirling muddy water, and set her down gently on the far bank. She bowed to him in gratitude, and he bowed in return, then continued on his way. The junior monk was aghast. He hurried across the river, his robes soaked and muddy, his mind a raging storm of judgment. How could he do that? He thought. It is a flagrant violation of our most sacred vows. He is a senior monk, a master. He should know better. For the next several hours, as they walked in silence, the junior monk was not present. He was back at the river, replaying the scene over and over. He rehearsed the speech he would give, the accusations he would make. His heart was heavy with indignation. Finally, as the sun began to set, he could bear it no longer. He stopped, turned to the old monk, and burst out, "Master, I must ask you, how could you do that back at the river? You know, we are forbidden to touch women. It was a terrible breach of your vows." The old monk stopped and looked at the junior monk with a calm, gentle expression of surprise. "Oh, the woman?" he said. "I left her on the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story shines a light directly into the heart of our self-inflicted suffering. We are all the junior monk. We carry people, conversations, injustices, and regrets with us long after the events have passed. We allow the ghosts of yesterday to weigh down our steps today. To let go does not mean to develop amnesia. It is not about pretending the past didn't happen. Wisdom is built upon the lessons of experience. Letting go means releasing the emotional charge, the narrative of grievance and regret that we attach to the memory. It is the difference between acknowledging a historical fact and being actively haunted by a ghost. You can learn from a mistake without bathing in the acid of regret every single day. You can acknowledge a past hurt without allowing the bitterness to poison your present relationships. You are simply setting down the heavy burden. Similarly, letting go of the future does not mean becoming passive or failing to plan. It is wise to have a goal, to save for retirement, to take steps toward a better life. The freedom lies in letting go of your attachment to the outcome. You do the work in the present moment. You plant the seed, you water the soil, you provide the sunlight, but you do not live in anxious torment, constantly digging up the seed to see if it has sprouted. You take the necessary actions with diligence and care, and then you release the result to the universe, understanding that a million other factors beyond your control will play a part. You bring your full presence to the process, not to the projection. By learning to set down the ghosts of yesterday and the phantoms of tomorrow, we find an incredible lightness in the present moment. We discover that this moment, right here, is enough. But sometimes, the mind, in its cleverness, finds another way to escape the present. It becomes entangled, not in personal history or future anxieties, but in grand, abstract questions about the nature of existence itself. When faced with the immediate reality of our own suffering, our mind can begin to spin endless philosophical webs, asking why and what for. It is in these moments that we need to remember another crucial piece of ancient wisdom, a story about priorities, a story about a poisoned arrow. By learning to set down the ghosts of yesterday and the phantoms of tomorrow, we find an incredible lightness in the present moment. We discover that this moment, right here, is enough. But the mind, in its infinite cleverness, has other ways to escape the raw, simple reality of the now. When it is not caught in personal history or future anxieties, it can become entangled in a different kind of trap, the web of abstract, philosophical speculation. When we are confronted with the sharp and undeniable reality of our own suffering, a sudden loss, a painful diagnosis, a deep-seated feeling of despair, the mind can recoil, not into the past or future, but into the vast, unanswerable questions of the cosmos. It begins to ask, why? Why is there suffering in the world? Why did this happen to me? What is the ultimate purpose of a life that contains such pain? Is the universe benevolent, malevolent, or simply indifferent? These are profound questions Yet pursuing them in the midst of acute pain is a form of subtle avoidance. It is in these moments that we most need to hear one of the Buddha's most urgent and practical teachings, a parable about priorities, a story about a poisoned arrow. The Buddha asks his followers to imagine a man who is walking through a forest and is suddenly struck by an arrow. It is not a clean wound. The arrow's tip has been smeared with a thick, fast-acting poison. His friends and family, seeing him fall, rush to his side. They are frantic, ready to pull the arrow out, to find a surgeon, to fetch an antidote. But the wounded man holds up a hand, stopping them. He refuses all aid. "I will not have this arrow removed," he declares, "until I have the answers to some important questions." His family stares in disbelief as he begins his list of inquiries. "First," he says, "I must know the identity of the man who shot me. To what caste did he belong? Was he a warrior, a priest, a merchant, or a common laborer? What is his name? And what is the name of his clan? Was he tall, or was he short? Was his complexion dark, brown, or golden? From which town, or city, or village did he come?" As his family pleads with him, the man grows more insistent. "And I will not allow this arrow to be touched until I know the nature of the weapon itself. What kind of wood was the bow made from? What material was the bowstring made of? Was it fibrous vine, or bamboo, or sinew? The arrow shaft, was it a wild wood or a cultivated wood? The feathers used for its fletching, did they come from a vulture, a heron, a hawk, or a peacock? And the arrowhead, was it a common point, or a curved blade, or a jagged piece of iron? And this poison," he says, his voice growing weaker, "what exactly are its ingredients?" The Buddha then turns to his monks and asks them a simple question. What would happen to that man? The answer is clear and terrible. The man would die. He would perish long before he ever found the answers to his questions. The identity of the archer and the specifications of the arrow are irrelevant to the immediate, life-threatening reality of the poison spreading through his veins. His thirst for information, his intellectual curiosity, has become a fatal distraction from the one thing that actually matters, getting the arrow out. We are all this man. The poisoned arrow is the fundamental reality of suffering or dukkha in our lives. It is the anxiety that keeps us awake at 3 in the morning. It is the grief that feels like a physical weight on our chest. It is the chronic illness, the unexpected betrayal, the deep sense of meaninglessness that can descend upon us like a fog. And our reaction is so often the same as the foolish man in the story. We become obsessed with the why. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? We get lost in complex theological and philosophical debates. If there is a loving God, how could he allow this? Is there karma? And if so, how does it work? What is the ultimate origin of the universe? And what is its final destiny? These questions are our version of asking about the archer's height and the fletching on the arrow. They may be intellectually stimulating, but when you are in the grip of real pain, they are a dangerous diversion. While you are spinning these elaborate mental webs, the poison of your suffering, the fear, the despair, the anger is spreading through your mind and body, causing more and more damage. The Buddha's message here is one of radical pragmatism. He did not present himself as a metaphysician with answers to all the universe's secrets. He presented himself as a spiritual physician. His one and only concern was the illness of human suffering and the path to its cure. He explicitly set aside certain types of questions, calling them a thicket of views, a wilderness of views, a contortion of views. Questions like whether the world is eternal or not, finite or infinite, whether the soul is the same as the body or different, whether an enlightened being continues to exist after death, that refused to answer them. He said that engaging with these questions did not lead to peace, to wisdom, to enlightenment, or to liberation. It only leads to more argument, more confusion, and more suffering. His teaching was relentlessly practical. First, deal with the arrow. The immediate problem is not the lack of a perfect cosmological map. The immediate problem is that you are in pain. The most important task is to alleviate that pain. The practices we have explored are the very tools for removing the arrow and treating the wound. When you bring your attention to your breath, you are beginning to pull out the arrow. When you observe a painful thought without getting swept away by it, you are cleaning the wound. When you practice compassion for yourself and your own pain, you are applying a soothing balm. These are not distractions from the problem. They are the direct solution to the problem. The deeper understanding that we seek, the answers to the big questions, do not arise from abstract reasoning in a state of distress. They arise naturally from a mind that has become calm, clear, and stable through practice. When the waters of the lake are muddy and turbulent, you cannot see the bottom. If you want to see the bottom, you don't stir the water more with endless questions. You let the mud settle. As the mind settles through meditation, you begin to see the nature of things directly. You don't need to read a book about impermanence. You see it in the rising and falling of every breath, every thought, every sensation. You don't need a philosophical proof of interconnectedness. You feel it directly when you extend compassion to another being. The wisdom is experiential, not conceptual. This is not a call to abandon intelligence or inquiry. The path to wisdom requires clear thinking and investigation. The point is one of priority and triage. When your house is on fire, you do not sit down to write a treatise on the chemical properties of combustion. You get yourself and your family to safety. Once the fire is out and you are no longer in immediate danger, you can investigate the cause. In the same way, once you have established a foundation of inner peace and emotional stability through dedicated practice, you are in a far better position to contemplate the deeper mysteries of life. Your insights will be born from a place of clarity and wisdom, not from the panic and confusion of a mind on fire. This pragmatic approach is incredibly empowering. It tells us that we don't need to have all the answers to the mysteries of the universe before we can find peace. We simply need to attend to our own wound, to practice with diligence. But this practice is not always easy. Life will continue to present us with challenges, with pain, with people and situations that feel like direct assaults on our well-being. Facing this reality, facing the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, requires more than just a clear priority. It requires a profound inner strength, an unshakable resilience. It requires us to develop a mind so stable that, as the Buddha vividly illustrated, it remains undisturbed even if villains were to take a two-handled saw and begin to carve us limb from limb. This pragmatic approach, focusing on the immediate reality of the poisoned arrow, is incredibly empowering. It tells us that we don't need to have all the answers to the mysteries of the universe before we can find peace. We simply need to attend to our own wound, to practice with diligence. But this practice is not always easy. Life will continue to present us with challenges, with pain, with people and situations that feel like direct assaults on our well-being. Facing this reality, facing the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, requires more than just a clear priority. It requires a profound inner strength, an unshakable resilience. It requires us to develop a mind so stable that, as the Buddha vividly illustrated in one of his most startling teachings, it remains undisturbed even if villains were to take a two-handled saw and begin to carve us limb from limb. This teaching, found in a discourse known as the simile of the saw, is perhaps one of the most shocking and demanding in all of spiritual literature. The Buddha addresses his monks directly, painting a horrific scene. He asks them to imagine that they have been captured by ruthless bandits. These bandits throw them to the ground and begin to brutally dismember them using a coarse, two-handled saw. As they are experiencing this unimaginable agony, the Buddha lays down the ultimate standard of practice. He says, "Monks, even if bandits were to carve you up savagely, limb by limb, with a two-handled saw, whoever among you would give rise to a mind of anger toward them would not be following my teaching." On first hearing, this instruction sounds impossible, almost inhuman. It seems to demand a level of detachment that is completely alien to our experience. It could be misinterpreted as a call to be passive in the face of violence or to suppress our natural human emotions. But to understand it in this way is to miss its profound and liberating point. The Buddha was a master teacher. He used this extreme, graphic example for a very specific reason. It is a thought experiment, designed to stress test a fundamental principle to its absolute limit. The saw represents the most extreme form of provocation, pain, and injustice that one could possibly endure. If the principle of mental mastery holds true even in this most horrific scenario, then it will certainly hold true for all the lesser saws that we face in our daily lives. The teaching is not a literal instruction on how to behave while being dismembered. It is a radical declaration of inner freedom. It is a lesson about where the true source of our suffering lies. The first arrow is the physical pain from the saw, and that is unavoidable. But the second arrow, the poison of anger, hatred, and ill will, is optional. The Buddha is stating that no matter what another person does to your physical body, they do not have the power to invade your mind and generate hatred unless you allow them to. Your inner world is your sovereign territory. The key to your own peace is always in your own hands, even at the moment of greatest agony. Now, let us bring this ancient and extreme example into the context of our modern lives. Thankfully, we are not likely to be assaulted by bandits with a saw, but our peace of mind is sawn apart every single day by other things. Think of the saw of criticism, a harsh, unfair comment from your boss, a dismissive remark from your partner, a barrage of negativity on social media. It can feel like a direct assault, carving away at your self-worth. The immediate sting is the first arrow, but the hours or days you spend replaying the comment, fuming with resentment, plotting your verbal revenge, or sinking into self-loathing, that is the second arrow. That is you picking up the saw yourself and continuing to cut away at your own peace. Then there is the saw of injustice. You see someone get a promotion you deserved. You read about corruption or cruelty in the news. You witness an act of unfairness. A feeling of righteous indignation wells up. This anger might feel justified, even noble, but if it solidifies into a persistent, consuming bitterness, it becomes its own poison. It saws away at your tranquility, while the object of your anger often remains completely unaffected. Perhaps the most relentless aggressor is the saw of our own inner critic. This is the voice that needs no external provocation. It is the internal bandit that saws away at our confidence by constantly replaying our past failures. It saws away at our joy by comparing us unfavorably to others. It saws away at our restfulness by filling our minds with anxious scenarios about the future. This inner saw is often the most damaging because we believe its voice is our own, that its judgments are the truth. In all these cases, the teaching of the saw applies. The goal is not to become a robot who feels nothing. The sting of criticism, the pain of betrayal, the frustration with injustice, these feelings will arise. The practice is to not let them become the fuel for hatred, resentment, and despair. The practice is to create a space between the event and your reaction. How then do we cultivate this seemingly superhuman resilience? It is not by hardening ourselves, by building thicker walls. A fortress is brittle. It can be breached. True resilience is found in becoming soft, spacious, and yielding, like water. You cannot harm water with a saw. It yields, allows the blade to pass through, and then returns to its natural state, undisturbed. A mind trained in this way develops the qualities of water. This is cultivated through the very practices we have been exploring. Mindfulness is the key that creates the space. By being mindful, you can watch the initial feeling of anger or hurt arise without immediately identifying with it. You see it as just a feeling, a cloud passing through the vast sky of your awareness. It is not you. In that space of observation, you find your freedom. You don't have to react. Furthermore, the Buddha's full instruction in the simile of the saw goes even further. He says that one should train oneself to pervade the bandits, the very people causing the pain, with thoughts of loving kindness. This is the ultimate antidote. It is the act of protecting your own mind from the corrosive poison of hatred. It seems impossible, but it is born from deep wisdom. It is the recognition that the people inflicting harm are themselves trapped in a profound state of suffering, driven by their own ignorance, greed, and hatred. To wish them well, to wish them to be free from the very suffering that makes them act so cruelly, is the highest form of self-preservation. It keeps your own heart open and boundless, immune to the contagion of their hatred. The ultimate freedom, then, is not freedom from life's difficulties. That is impossible. The ultimate freedom is freedom from being mentally and emotionally enslaved by them. It is the deep, unshakable peace that comes from knowing that your inner well-being is not a fragile thing, dependent on external praise or circumstance, but an inner fortress of peace that you yourself have built. This teaching of the saw is perhaps the most challenging and radical in the entire canon. It points to a strength of mind that seems almost superhuman. Faced with such a high ideal, it's easy to feel discouraged or to misunderstand the path as one of extreme, rigid asceticism, a life of joyless self-control. But this would be a fundamental misinterpretation. The Buddha's great discovery was not found in extremity. The strength to withstand the saw does not come from hardening the heart or denying the body, just as it does not come from indulging every whim. It arises from a place of profound balance, a path he called the Majjhima Patipada, the middle way. The teaching of the saw is perhaps the most challenging and radical in the entire canon. It points to a strength of mind that seems almost superhuman. Faced with such a high ideal, it's easy to feel discouraged or to misunderstand the path as one of extreme, rigid asceticism, a life of joyless self-control. But this would be a fundamental misinterpretation. The Buddha's great discovery was not found in extremity. The strength to withstand the saw does not come from hardening the heart or denying the body, just as it does not come from indulging every whim. It arises from a place of profound balance, a path he called the Majjhima Patipada, the middle way. To understand this path is to understand the Buddha's own life story, a story of a journey through two opposite, yet equally unsatisfying, extremes. The first extreme was a life of absolute sensual indulgence. As the young prince Siddhartha Gautama, he was born into immense wealth and power. His father, the king, determined to shield his son from any sight of human suffering, surrounded him with every imaginable pleasure. He lived in 3 magnificent palaces, one for each season, draped in the finest silks from Benares. He was entertained by the most beautiful dancers and musicians. He was served the most exquisite foods, protected by guards and walls from even the slightest hint of the world's harshness. He had everything that material and sensual desire could possibly want. Yet, in the midst of this gilded cage, a deep and unsettling question grew within him. He felt a profound spiritual unease, a sense that all this fleeting pleasure was a beautiful mask hiding a terrifying truth. He realized that a life dedicated to chasing pleasure and avoiding discomfort was ultimately a shallow and anxious one, for it is a battle that can never be won. Sickness, old age, and death are the inescapable realities of life, and no amount of luxury could build a fortress against them. And so, at the age of 29, he embarked on his great renunciation, swinging to the opposite pole of existence. He left the palace, his wife, his newborn son, and all his worldly comforts behind, to seek the truth as a homeless ascetic. He sought out the most renowned spiritual teachers of his day and dedicated himself to the most severe practices of self-mortification. He believed, as many did, that by punishing the body, he could liberate the spirit. He practiced extreme fasting, eating only a single grain of rice or a jujube fruit per day. His body wasted away until his ribs stuck out like the rafters of a dilapidated barn. He would say that when he touched his stomach, he could feel his spine. His hair fell out, and his golden skin turned dark and withered. He subjected himself to excruciating physical pain, sleeping on beds of thorns, and standing for days on one leg. He practiced breath control to an extreme degree, holding his breath until he felt violent pains in his head, as if it were being split open with a sword. He pushed his body and mind to the absolute brink of death, mastering the art of pain. Yet, after 6 years of this brutal self-torture, he was no closer to the answer. He had merely traded the prison of pleasure for the prison of pain. His mind, far from being liberated, was weakened and exhausted by the torment he inflicted on his body. He had not found the end of suffering. The turning point came one day as he sat, emaciated and near death, by the banks of a river. He overheard a musician on a passing boat teaching his student how to tune a lute. The string, the teacher said, must not be too tight, for it will snap, and it must not be too loose, for it will not make a sound. In that simple, practical instruction, Siddhartha heard a profound truth about his own journey. His life in the palace was the loose string flabby, indulgent, and producing no meaningful spiritual music. His life as an ascetic was the tight string strain to the breaking point, producing only a sound of pain and struggle. The path to awakening, he realized in a flash of insight, must lie between these two extremes. It must be a middle way, a path of balance, like a perfectly tuned instrument capable of producing a beautiful melody. With this realization, he accepted a humble bowl of milk rice from a village girl named Sujata. This simple act of nourishment, an act that his former ascetic companions viewed as a great failure, was in fact his first step on the true path. By nourishing his body, he gave his mind the strength and clarity it needed to make its final breakthrough into full enlightenment. This middle way became the very essence of his teaching. It is not, as is sometimes thought, a lukewarm compromise or an excuse for mediocrity. It is a sharp, intelligent, and dynamic path of balance that avoids the pitfalls of both extremes. In modern life, we are constantly pulled toward these same two poles. The extreme of sensual indulgence is the dominant message of our consumer culture. It is the pursuit of happiness through external means. The next purchase, the next promotion, the next vacation, the next dopamine hit from our phones. It is the frantic cycle of working ourselves to the bone so we can afford to distract ourselves with fleeting pleasures, only to find ourselves feeling empty and exhausted. The other extreme, that of self-mortification, can also take modern forms. It can be seen in obsessive and punishing fitness regimes, in workaholism disguised as discipline, or in a kind of spiritual perfectionism where we relentlessly judge ourselves for not being calm enough, mindful enough, or pure enough. We believe that if we just control, restrict, and punish ourselves enough, we will find peace. The middle way offers a saner and more sustainable path. It is finding the balance between work and rest, recognizing that deep rest is not laziness, but an essential part of a productive and creative life. It is the balance between discipline and self-compassion, having the commitment to a practice like meditation, but also the kindness to accept that some days will be harder than others. It is the balance between effort and ease, applying ourselves to our goals with diligence, but without the anxious, white-knuckled striving that creates so much stress, learning instead to flow with the natural currents of life. It is nourishing our bodies with wholesome food because we respect them as the vessel of our consciousness, not punishing them with crash diets born of self-hatred. It is moving our bodies with joy and for strength, not as a penance for what we ate. It is a path that honors our full humanity, our spiritual aspirations, and our physical needs, our minds, and our hearts. The middle way, then, is not a vague compromise, but a highly intelligent, dynamic path of balance that honors both our spiritual aspirations and our human needs. It is the art of tuning the instrument of our own being. But to navigate this path effectively, to make choices that lead toward greater harmony and less suffering, requires a clear understanding of the law of cause and effect as it applies to our actions. This is not about fate or cosmic judgment, but about a practical and empowering principle that the Buddha clarified and placed at the heart of his teaching. This principle is karma. The middle way, then, is not a vague compromise, but a highly intelligent, dynamic path of balance that honors both our spiritual aspirations and our human needs. It is the art of tuning the instrument of our own being. But to navigate this path effectively, to make choices that lead toward greater harmony and less suffering, requires a clear understanding of the law of cause and effect as it applies to our actions. This is not about fate or cosmic judgment, but about a practical and empowering principle that the Buddha clarified and placed at the heart of his teaching. This principle is karma. Of all the Eastern concepts that have entered the Western lexicon, perhaps none is more widely known, yet more profoundly misunderstood than karma. In popular culture, it's often reduced to a simplistic slogan of cosmic revenge. What goes around, comes around. It's seen as a system of divine retribution, a universal scorekeeper tallying our good and bad deeds to dispense rewards and punishments. We talk about instant karma when someone who cuts us off in traffic gets a speeding ticket moments later. We think of it as fate, a predetermined destiny written in the stars, sealing us to a certain life path. But the Buddha's teaching on karma, or karma in the original Pali language, is far more subtle, psychological, and empowering than any of these interpretations. At its core, karma is simply the law of cause and effect in the moral sphere. The word itself literally means action or deed. The law of karma states that every intentional action we perform creates a corresponding result. It is as natural and impersonal as the law of gravity. If you release an apple from your hand, it will fall to the ground. That is not a punishment or a reward. It is simply the nature of things. In the same way, actions rooted in certain qualities of mind will naturally produce results that reflect those qualities. It is the law of the harvest. You reap what you sow. If you plant a seed of kindness, the fruit that grows will likely be one of trust and connection. If you plant a seed of anger, the fruit will likely be one of conflict and alienation. These actions are performed through 3 doors: the body, speech, and the mind. An action of the body could be a comforting embrace or a violent blow. An action of speech can be a healing word of encouragement or a cutting, hateful remark. And most importantly, an action of the mind can be a thought of goodwill or a thought of consuming jealousy. The true revolutionary core of the Buddha's teaching on karma, however, is his emphasis on one crucial element: intention. He once famously said, "It is intention, monks, that I call karma." Having intended, one acts through body, speech, and mind. This changes everything. It shifts the focus from the external action to the internal motive. The same physical act can have vastly different karmic weight depending on the intention behind it. Imagine you accidentally bump into someone on a crowded street and cause them to fall. You are immediately apologetic and help them up. The action had a negative result, but the intention was absent, so the karmic imprint is minimal. Now, imagine you intentionally shove a person to the ground out of malice. The physical action might look similar, but the intention to harm creates a heavy, negative karmic seed in your own mind. This is why self-awareness is so crucial on the path. We must learn to look at our own motivations honestly. Am I giving this gift out of pure generosity, or because I want something in return? Am I offering this advice to genuinely help, or to feel superior and in control? The intention is the seed, and the quality of that seed determines the nature of the fruit that will eventually grow. With this understanding, karma ceases to be a system of fate and becomes the ultimate principle of empowerment. A common pitfall is to look at one's own or others' misfortune and think, this must be their bad karma. This can lead to a sense of helpless resignation or a cruel blame the victim mentality. But life is incredibly complex, and not everything that happens is a direct, one-to-one result of a past action. Our lives are shaped by a confluence of forces: social, economic, biological, and environmental, as well as our karmic inheritance. The true purpose of understanding karma is not to endlessly analyze the past, to figure out what we did, to deserve our present circumstances. That is just another way of being the man with the poisoned arrow, asking irrelevant questions while the poison spreads. The liberating power of karma is that it focuses our attention squarely on the present moment, the only place where we have true agency. The teaching states that we are the heirs of our own actions. This doesn't mean we are doomed by our past. It means we are the creators of our future. You cannot change the seeds you planted yesterday, but in this very moment, you have the absolute freedom to choose what seeds you will plant today. You are the farmer of your own mind. Every moment of conscious choice is a chance to sow a seed of patience, of kindness, of forgiveness, of understanding. The most dramatic illustration of this transformative power is the story of one of the most feared figures of the Buddha's time, a ruthless serial killer named Angulimala, which means garland of fingers. He was a bandit of terrifying cruelty who terrorized the kingdom of Kosala. His practice was to murder travelers, cut off one of their fingers, and add it to the gruesome necklace he wore. He had collected 999 fingers, and entire villages were abandoned in fear of him. Hearing of this, the Buddha, against the advice of all, set out alone and walked calmly into the forest where Angulimala lived. When Angulimala saw the Buddha, he was delighted. "Here is my final victim," he thought, and began to run after him. But a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal pace, Angulimala, running with all his might, could not catch up. Exhausted and confused, he shouted, "Stop, ascetic! Stop!" The Buddha, still walking, turned, and replied with a phrase that would change the course of history. "I have stopped. Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." This cryptic statement shattered Angulimala's reality. "What do you mean?" he demanded. The Buddha explained, "I have stopped, for I have laid down the sword and have ceased from doing harm to any living being. You are still running in the endless cycle of violence and hatred. You have not stopped." In that instant, the truth of the Buddha's words pierced Angulimala's heart. He saw the horror and futility of his own life, and the profound peace emanating from the man before him. He threw down his weapons, prostrated himself at the Buddha's feet, and begged to become a monk. The Buddha accepted him. But the story doesn't end there. Though Angulimala became a diligent and peaceful monk, his past karma had not simply vanished. When he would walk into a village for alms, the people, remembering the terror he had inflicted, would scream and throw stones and refuse him food. He would often return to the monastery bruised and bleeding. The Buddha would tell him to bear it with patience, explaining that he was experiencing, in this very life, the immediate results of actions that could have caused him to suffer for eons in a lower realm. The story of Angulimala is a testament to the fact that one's destiny is never sealed. No matter how dark the past, the power of intentional action in the present moment holds the potential for complete transformation and liberation. Understanding karma in this way transforms us from passive victims of circumstance into active creators of our reality. We are the farmers of our own minds, and every moment presents a choice of what seed to plant. But for these wholesome seeds to truly take root and flourish, they require fertile soil. A mind that is constantly agitated, noisy, and filled with the chatter of the world is like hard, compacted ground where nothing can grow. To cultivate the inner conditions for wisdom and peace to sprout, we must first learn the profound art of creating space, of turning down the volume of the external world, and embracing the transformative potential of noble silence. Understanding karma transforms us from passive victims of circumstance into active creators of our reality. We are the farmers of our own minds, and every moment presents a choice of what seed to plant. But for these wholesome seeds to truly take root and flourish, they require fertile soil. A mind that is constantly agitated, noisy, and filled with the chatter of the world is like hard, compacted ground where nothing can grow. To cultivate the inner conditions for wisdom and peace to sprout, we must first learn the profound art of creating space, of turning down the volume of the external world, and embracing the transformative potential of noble silence. Our modern world is in the midst of an epidemic of noise. It is a constant, relentless assault on our senses. From the moment we wake to the glow of a smartphone screen, we are inundated. Notifications buzz and ping. The television chatters in the background. Podcasts fill our commutes. Music fills our workouts. And social media feeds fill every spare moment with a torrent of opinions, images, and manufactured outrage. But the most insidious noise is not external. It is internal. It is the non-stop inner narrator, the monkey mind, that is constantly judging, planning, worrying, and replaying conversations. We live with a permanent soundtrack of our own thoughts, a noise so constant that we no longer even notice it. We have become uncomfortable with its absence. An empty moment feels like a void that must be immediately filled with some form of stimulation. We have forgotten how to simply be. In this context, it is crucial to distinguish between ordinary silence and what the Buddha called noble silence. Ordinary silence is merely the absence of audible sound. You can be in a library or a quiet room, Yet your mind can still be a raging tempest of anxiety and inner dialogue. Noble silence, or Arya Tushnimbhava, is something far deeper. It is primarily an internal silence. It begins with the restraint of speech, but its ultimate goal is the quieting of that inner narrator. It is the cessation of mental commentary, the release from the compulsion to have an opinion on everything, the freedom from the inner critic and the anxious planner. External silence is a powerful tool, a training ground for achieving this inner peace. By choosing to refrain from speaking, we reduce the amount of fuel we feed to our restless minds. In a culture that values constant productivity and connectivity, the deliberate choice to embrace silence is a radical, even subversive, act of healing. It is a declaration of independence from the tyranny of distraction. When you first attempt it, you will likely feel a profound discomfort. The urge to speak, to check your phone, to turn on the television will be immense. This is a form of withdrawal. Our nervous systems have become addicted to the constant stimulation, the steady drip of dopamine from new information and entertainment. When we cut off the supply, the mind rebels. But if you can sit with that discomfort, you will find that it passes. On the other side of that initial restlessness lies a space of incredible richness and restoration. To choose silence is not to embrace emptiness, it is to embrace fullness. It is like allowing a field to lie fallow for a season. It may look unproductive from the outside, but it is a vital period of regeneration, allowing the soil to recover its nutrients so that it can bear healthy fruit once more. Our minds desperately need these fallow periods to process, to heal, and to rest. What emerges from this silence is often what we have been using noise to avoid. When the constant churn of distraction subsides, the things we have suppressed have a chance to rise to the surface. It is like a glass of water filled with mud. As long as you keep stirring it, the water remains murky and opaque. But when you set the glass down and allow it to be still, the mud slowly begins to settle and the water clarifies. In the stillness of noble silence, the sediment of our minds, the old, unprocessed griefs, the latent anxieties, the half-forgotten resentments, the hidden fears begins to settle. Our first instinct may be to panic and start stirring again, to grab our phone and escape back into the familiar noise. The practice, however, is to simply watch. Noble silence provides the safe and spacious container in which these difficult emotions can arise, be seen without judgment, and finally be released. You don't have to fix them or analyze them. You simply witness them as impersonal, impermanent energies passing through you. In this gentle, non-reactive observation, they lose their power. This is the path of true emotional purification, not by force, but by quiet acceptance. The power of this practice is embodied in the daily life of a traditional Zen monastery. A visitor entering such a place is often struck first by the profound depth of the silence. It is not an empty or awkward silence, but one that is alive and vibrant. The only sounds are those that are necessary and mindful. The gentle sweeping of a broom, the ringing of a small bell to signal a change in activity, the rhythmic chanting in the meditation hall, the sound of footsteps on a wooden walkway. For much of the day, and especially during intensive meditation retreats known as session, the monks maintain a disciplined, noble silence. The purpose is not merely to enforce a rule, it is a core part of the training. By refraining from all unnecessary conversation, the monks conserve an immense amount of mental energy. They are not engaged in small talk, in debating ideas, or in defending their egos. All of that energy is turned inward, focused like a laser on the practice of self-observation. The silence itself becomes the loudest teacher in the monastery. It starves the ego, which thrives on being heard and validated. It fosters a powerful sense of shared purpose and non-verbal connection among the practitioners. In this deep quiet, insights that cannot be found in books or lectures have the space to arise spontaneously from the depths of one's own mind. You do not need to enter a monastery to experience the benefits of this practice. You can integrate noble silence into your own life in scalable ways. You might begin with a digital sunset, turning off all screens, phone, computer, television for the final hour before you go to sleep. Use that time to read a physical book, stretch gently, or simply sit and be quiet. You could practice a silent commute, driving to work without the radio, podcasts, or phone calls, just being present with the experience of driving. Take a silent walk in nature, leaving your headphones behind, and attune your senses to the subtle sounds of the world around you. As you become more comfortable, you might try a half day or even a full day of silence on a weekend. Inform your family or roommates of your intention, and then commit to a period of no speaking, no texting, no email, no media. You can engage in simple activities like cooking, gardening, cleaning, or walking. You may be shocked at how loud your own mind is at first, but if you persist, you will be rewarded with a sense of clarity, calm, and profound rest that is impossible to achieve otherwise. Embracing noble silence is like letting the muddy water of a glass settle. As the sediment of our restless thoughts and emotions sinks to the bottom, the water becomes clear. And in this newfound clarity, we begin to perceive something fundamental about the nature of the water itself, and indeed, about the nature of the glass that holds it. We begin to see past the surface-level stories of me and mine, and into the profound, interconnected reality that underlies all phenomena. This is the gateway to understanding one of the most subtle and liberating teachings of all, the wisdom of emptiness, or shunyata. Embracing noble silence is like letting the muddy water of a glass settle. As the sediment of our restless thoughts and emotions sinks to the bottom, the water becomes clear. And in this newfound clarity, we begin to perceive something fundamental about the nature of the water itself, and indeed, about the nature of the glass that holds it. We begin to see past the surface-level stories of me and mine, and into the profound, interconnected reality that underlies all phenomena. This is the gateway to understanding one of the most subtle, challenging, and ultimately liberating teachings of all, the wisdom of emptiness, or shunyata. The word emptiness can sound frightening to the Western ear. It conjures images of a cold, meaningless void, of nihilism, of a universe devoid of substance and value. But in the Buddhist context, emptiness means the very opposite. It is not a teaching about nothingness. It is a teaching about the fullness of everything. It does not negate our existence. It reveals its true, wondrous nature. It is the key that unlocks us from the prison of our own perceived separateness and reveals a world of profound and intricate connection. The simplest way to understand emptiness is to see that nothing in the entire universe exists independently. Everything is empty of a separate, isolated self, because everything is with everything else. To make this clear, let us look deeply at something as simple as a flower. We see its color, its petals, its stem, but if we look with the eyes of wisdom, we see much more. We see the cloud that is not the flower, but without the cloud and its rain, the flower could not exist. We see the sunshine, which is not the flower, but without the sun's light and warmth, the flower would wither and die. We see the soil the minerals, and the generations of decaying leaves that have provided the flower with nourishment. We see the farmer who planted the seed, the bee that may have pollinated its ancestor. If we were to take away the sun, the cloud, the soil, the air, and all these non-flower elements, there would be no flower left. The flower is entirely made up of things that are not the flower. It has no separate, independent core. It is a temporary, beautiful manifestation of the entire cosmos. In this sense, it is empty of a solid, unchanging, separate self. Now, let us turn this same gentle, analytical gaze upon the thing we hold most dear, ourself. We have a name, a body, a collection of memories, beliefs, and feelings that we label as me. We feel intensely that we are a separate entity, an independent consciousness inside our skin, looking out at a world that is not me. But are we really so separate? Let's look at our body. It is made of the food we have eaten, food that is itself made of sun, rain, and earth. It is made of the air we are breathing right now, air that has been breathed by countless other beings and passed through the leaves of innumerable trees. Our physical form is not ours. It is a borrowed piece of the planet. Now let's look at our mind, our thoughts, our feelings. Where did they come from? Our language, our core beliefs, our ways of seeing the world. They were given to us by our parents, our culture, our teachers, the books we have read, the conversations we have had. Every thought that we think is an echo of 1,000 other thoughts. Every feeling we feel has been felt by billions of others. Just like the flower, if we were to remove all these non-self elements from ourselves, our parents, our food, the air, our culture, our language, what would be left of this me? The conclusion is the same, both startling and liberating. The self that we cherish as so solid and separate is also empty of any intrinsic, independent existence. We are with the entire universe. Understanding this intellectually is one thing. Feeling it in our hearts is another. Perhaps the most beautiful metaphor for this reality is that of the wave and the ocean. Imagine a single wave rising from the sea. It has a distinct form, a clear identity. It has a beginning as it swells, a middle as it crests and travels, and an end as it dissolves into the shore. From the perspective of the wave, it might feel very alone. It might look at other waves and feel jealousy or competition. That wave is bigger than me. Or, I am moving faster than that one. It might look at the shore ahead and feel a deep existential fear, the terror of its own impending end, its own death. But what is the true nature of the wave? Is it anything other than water? At no point in its existence is it ever separate from the ocean. Its beginning is simply the ocean rising up. Its end is simply the ocean falling back into itself. The feeling of being a separate wave is a temporary illusion based on a fleeting form. The reality is that the wave is the ocean. It was always the ocean, and it will always be the ocean. We are like these waves. We have our individual bodies, our life stories, our unique journeys. We feel our separateness acutely. We experience the fear of our own end. But this teaching on emptiness invites us to shift our identity from the transient wave to the vast, eternal ocean. You are not just the wave of this particular life. You are the entire ocean of existence, temporarily manifesting in this form. When you realize you are the ocean, the fear of the wave's dissolution loses its sting. How can the ocean fear the death of a single wave? This realization is the source of a profound and fearless peace. It dissolves the feeling of loneliness. For how can the ocean be lonely? It is connected to every shore, every river, every cloud. In the same way, when we understand our inner being, we see that we are never truly alone. We are connected to every person, every animal, every star in the sky. This brings us to the final, crucial point about emptiness. It is not a cold, static nothingness. It is the very ground of possibility itself. Because things are empty, of a fixed, unchanging essence, they are free to change, to grow, and to become. Because a seed is empty of being a permanent, solid seed, it has the potential to become a mighty tree. Because a caterpillar is empty of a fixed caterpillarness, it can transform into a butterfly. And because you are empty of a fixed, unchanging self, you have the infinite potential to grow, to learn, to heal, and to awaken. Emptiness is not a void, it is a womb. It is the boundless, creative space in which all things arise and pass away in a constant, dynamic dance. It is the ultimate freedom from being locked into the prison of a single, static identity. The wisdom of emptiness, of interbeing, is not something to be simply understood with the intellect. It must be seen with the heart, with a mind that is fresh and uncluttered. It asks us to look at the world, at ourselves, and at each other with new eyes. But our minds are often like a cup that is already full of our own opinions, expertise, and preconceived notions, leaving no room for a new perspective to be poured in. To truly perceive this interconnected dance of reality, we must be willing to empty our cup. We must cultivate a mind that is open, curious, and free from the arrogance of knowing. This is the spirit of Shoshin, the beginner's mind. The wisdom of emptiness, of interbeing, is not something to be simply understood with the intellect. It must be seen with the heart, with a mind that is fresh and uncluttered. It asks us to look at the world, at ourselves, and at each other with new eyes. But our minds are often like a cup that is already full of our own opinions, expertise, and preconceived notions, leaving no room for a new perspective to be poured in. To truly perceive this interconnected dance of reality, we must be willing to empty our cup. We must cultivate a mind that is open, curious, and free from the arrogance of knowing. This is the spirit of Shoshin, the beginner's mind. In the world of Zen, there is a famous saying, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." This single sentence captures the essence of Shoshin. It is not a celebration of ignorance, but a recognition that the mind of a true beginner is a mind that is open, eager, and free from the burden of assumption. It is the quality of mind that a child has when they look at the world, a state of pure wonder and curiosity, where everything is new and fascinating. The expert, on the other hand, is in danger. Their accumulated knowledge, while valuable, can harden into a rigid set of beliefs. The expert's mind tends to filter, to categorize, and to judge new information based on old frameworks. It dismisses what it doesn't understand and quickly labels what it thinks it does. It stops asking questions and starts providing answers. In doing so, the expert closes the door to a universe of new possibilities, and their world begins to shrink. We all fall into the trap of the expert's mind in our daily lives. We become experts on our partners, believing we know exactly what they will say or do, and so we stop truly listening to them. We become experts on our jobs, performing our tasks on autopilot, our creativity and engagement dwindling. We become experts on ourselves, locked into a story of who I am, reinforcing old habits and closing ourselves off from our own potential for growth. There is a classic Zen story that serves as a powerful parable for this human tendency. A learned university professor, a man who had read dozens of books on the history and philosophy of Zen, went to visit a famous Zen master. Upon being received, the professor immediately began to talk. showing off his extensive knowledge. He spoke of the sutras, of different lineages, of complex philosophical points. He was not there to learn, but to demonstrate his own expertise. The master listened patiently and then said, "Let us have some tea." He prepared the tea set and began to pour tea into the professor's cup. He filled the cup to the brim, and then, without stopping, he continued to pour. Tea overflowed the cup, ran into the saucer, and began to spill onto the table. The professor, unable to contain himself, shouted, "Stop! The cup is full. No more will go in." The Zen master calmly put down the teapot, looked at the professor, and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" This story is a direct teaching for all of us. Our minds are the cup, and our accumulated beliefs, biases, and ego are the tea that fills it to overflowing. To learn anything new, to have a fresh experience, to truly see the world as it is, we must first be willing to empty our cup. We must cultivate a beginner's mind. To practice Shoshin is to consciously let go of what you think you know, and to approach every moment as a fresh encounter. Try looking at a familiar object in your home, a plant, a piece of furniture, your own handers. If you are seeing it for the very first time, let go of the label plant or hand and simply observe its form, its texture, its color, the way the light falls upon it. You may be amazed at what you notice when you are not looking through the filter of past experience. This practice can be profoundly transformative when applied to our relationships. Choose a person you are close to, a spouse, a child, a close friend. For a few moments, consciously set aside the entire history you have with them. Let go of the story you tell yourself about who they are. He's always late. She's always so sensitive. He never listens. Approach them with an empty cup. See the person who is in front of you right now, not the mental projection you have built up over years. When you look with a beginner's mind, you might see the subtle tiredness in their eyes you hadn't noticed, or the genuine kindness in a small gesture. You give them the space to be who they are now, not who they have always been. In this space, relationships can be reborn. Perhaps the most practical and powerful application of Shoshin is in the art of listening. Most of the time, we are not truly listening to one another. We are engaged in what could be called expert listening. We hear the first few words someone says. Our expert mind immediately categorizes the topic, retrieves our opinion from its files, and we spend the rest of the time formulating our response, waiting for our turn to speak. We listen in order to reply, to correct, to advise, or to win an argument. To listen with a beginner's mind is a radical act of generosity. It is to listen with no other goal than to understand. You set aside your own agenda, your own story, your own brilliant reply. You offer the other person the full, open, spacious attention of your quiet mind. You listen not just to their words, but to the feelings behind the words, to their tone of voice, to their body language. The person speaking feels a profound sense of respect and validation. They feel truly seen. This is one of the greatest gifts we can offer another human being. And in the process, we, the listeners, might actually learn something new and have our own perspectives broadened. The beginner's mind, this practice of emptying our cup, makes our mind soft, pliable, and responsive. We stop trying to force reality to fit our preconceived notions. Instead, we become open to reality as it is. This profound shift in our inner posture naturally leads to a change in our outer actions. When we stop fighting the current of life with the rigid oars of our expertise and opinions, we discover that we can act with a surprising grace and effectiveness. We learn to move with the current, not against it. This is the heart of an ancient wisdom that teaches not of struggle, but of flow, the art of effortless action. The beginner's mind, this practice of emptying our cup, makes our minds soft, pliable, and responsive. We stop trying to force reality to fit our preconceived notions. Instead, we become open to reality as it is. This profound shift in our inner posture naturally leads to a change in our outer actions. When we stop fighting the current of life with the rigid oars of our expertise and opinions, we discover that we can act with a surprising grace and effectiveness. We learn to move with the current, not against it. This is the heart of an ancient wisdom that teaches not of struggle, but of flow, the art of effortless action. To explore this art, we turn to a principle from Taoist philosophy, a tradition that deeply influenced the development of Zen Buddhism in China. The principle is called Wu Wei. A direct translation is often given as non-action or non-doing, which can be misleading. It does not mean being passive, lazy, or apathetic. Wu Wei is better understood as effortless action, action without striving, or acting in a way that is so in harmony with the natural flow of things that it feels as if one is doing nothing at all. It is the opposite of the tense, frantic, ego-driven, forcing that characterizes so much of our modern life. It is the state of being in the zone or in a flow state, where action arises spontaneously and perfectly from a place of deep intuition, rather than from anxious calculation. Imagine a surfer on the ocean. An unskilled person might try to fight the waves, paddling frantically against the current, exhausting themselves and getting tossed about in the churning water. They are trying to impose their will upon the ocean, an impossible task. The master surfer, on the other hand, embodies Wu Wei. They do not try to control the wave. They spend their time observing, feeling the rhythm of the ocean, waiting for the right moment. When the perfect wave begins to form, they act with a burst of decisive, focused effort to catch it. But once they are on the wave, their action becomes one of dynamic surrender. They are not commanding the wave, they are dancing with it. They adjust their balance, shifting their weight in subtle harmony with the water's immense power. Their spectacular ride is a perfect collaboration between their skill and the natural energy of the ocean. This is Wu Wei, the art of knowing when to apply effort and when to yield to a greater force. The ancient Taoist texts often used water itself as the ultimate symbol of Wu Wei. Water is by its nature soft and yielding. It does not resist obstacles, it flows around them. If it meets a rock, it does not try to smash it, it parts and continues on its way. Yet, over time, this same soft, yielding water can wear away the hardest stone. Water always seeks the lowest ground, effortlessly finding its own level without struggle. It demonstrates the power of adaptability and humility over rigid force. To practice Wu Wei is to cultivate the qualities of water in our own lives, to be fluid, to be adaptable, and to understand that there is great strength in yielding. The most profound story illustrating Wu Wei is that of Cook Ding, a humble butcher serving a great lord. The lord, Prince Wenhui, came to watch him work and was mesmerized. Cook Ding was carving up an ox carcass, but his movements were unlike anything the prince had ever seen. He did not seem to be cutting at all. His knife glided and danced. A touch of his hand here, a nudge of his shoulder there, and with a soft whispering sound, huge chunks of meat would fall away from the bone, as if by themselves. He moved in perfect rhythm, like a dancer performing a sacred ritual. In a few moments, the entire ox was dismembered, lying in neat piles on the ground. "Astonishing," said the prince. "Your skill is truly an art. How did you achieve this?" Cook Ding laid down his knife and replied, "What I love," he said, "is the way, which goes beyond mere skill. When I first began to cut up oxen, all I could see was the ox itself. After 3 years, I no longer saw the whole ox, and now I meet it with my spirit and don't look with my eyes. My senses stop working, and my spirit is free to move. I follow the natural lines, my knife slipping through the great gaps, moving through the large openings, following things as they are. I never touch the smallest ligament or tendon, let alone a major joint." He then explained further, "A good cook changes his knife once a year because he cuts. A mediocre cook changes his knife once a month because he hacks. I have had this knife for 19 years, and I have cut up thousands of oxen, and yet the blade is as sharp as if it had just come from the grindstone. There are spaces between the joints, and the blade of the knife has no thickness. If you insert what has no thickness into such spaces, then there is plenty of room for the blade to move about. That is why the blade is still as sharp as new." This story is a deep teaching on how to live. The ox is any problem we face in life: a difficult project at work, a conflict in a relationship, a personal challenge. Most of us are mediocre cooks. We approach our problems with brute force, with the tense, striving energy of our ego. We hack at them, trying to bend them to our will, and in the process, we dull our own knife. We exhaust our energy, burn ourselves out, and become frustrated and resentful. Cook Ding, the master of Wu Wei, shows us another way. He doesn't force a solution. He first relaxes and observes until he understands the inherent nature of the problem, its natural lines, its great gaps. He acts not from ego, but from an intuitive spirit that is in harmony with the situation. He applies his effort only where it will be effective, in the empty spaces where there is no resistance. To bring this practice into our lives, we must first learn to recognize the feeling of hacking. Notice the areas of your life where you feel the most strain, frustration, and resistance. That feeling of friction is a valuable signal. It is telling you that you are likely trying to force something against its nature. It is an invitation to pause, to stop hacking, and to observe. Is there another way? Is there a natural opening you are not seeing? Wu Wei is also the art of timing. Sometimes, the most skillful action is to wait patiently for the right conditions to arise, for the right wave to form. We often act out of sheer impatience and anxiety, and in doing so, we create more problems. Learning to wait with a calm and observant mind is a profound skill. Ultimately, Wu Wei is an inner posture of reduced resistance. It is letting go of the ego's desperate need to control every outcome. When we approach life with a beginner's mind, free from rigid expectations, we are far more likely to perceive the subtle, natural flow of things and to find the empty spaces through which our knife can effortlessly glide. The practice of Wu Wei, of effortless action, is a profound shift from struggling against life to dancing with it. When we learn to stop hacking at our problems and instead find the natural spaces through which to move, every situation, no matter how complex, becomes less of a battle. This changes not only how we act, but how we learn. An experience that was once seen as a frustrating obstacle to be overcome with brute force can now be seen as a teacher, offering a unique lesson in its very structure. When we approach life with this grace and openness, we discover that everyone we meet and every challenge we face has something valuable to teach us. The practice of Wu Wei, of effortless action, is a profound shift from struggling against life to dancing with it. When we learn to stop hacking at our problems and instead find the natural spaces through which to move, every situation, no matter how complex, becomes less of a battle. This changes not only how we act, but how we learn. An experience that was once seen as a frustrating obstacle to be overcome with brute force can now be seen as a teacher, offering a unique lesson in its very structure. When we approach life with this grace and openness, we discover that everyone we meet and every challenge we face has something valuable to teach us. This is one of the most transformative paradigm shifts on the spiritual path. Our ordinary mind is a relentless judge and sorter. It constantly categorizes our experiences. This is good, that is bad. This person is for me, that person is against me. This event is a success, that event is a failure. We spend our lives trying to cling to the good and push away the bad, an exhausting and ultimately futile struggle. The new paradigm invites us to stop sorting and to start learning. It proposes that every single experience, and especially every difficult one, is a custom-designed lesson for our own awakening. Life itself becomes our wisest and most patient teacher. The person who cuts you off in traffic and fills you with rage is not just an inconsiderate driver. They are your personal, real-time teacher of patience. They are offering you a free, spontaneous workshop on managing anger. Can you watch the anger arise without being consumed by it? Can you feel the frustration without letting it ruin your day? The person who criticizes you unfairly at work is not just your adversary. They are your teacher of non-attachment. They are shining a bright, uncomfortable light on the exact place where your ego is most tender, where you are still seeking external validation for your self-worth. They are teaching you the freedom that comes from not needing anyone else's approval. The friend who disappoints you is your teacher of impermanence and acceptance, showing you that you cannot control the actions of others, only your own response. The tedious, boring task is your teacher of mindfulness, challenging you to bring your full presence to even the most mundane activities. And the profound pain of loss is life's most direct and powerful teacher of letting go, showing you on a visceral level the truth that everything is transient. When you adopt this perspective, your entire relationship with life changes. There are no more interruptions to your spiritual practice, because everything is your spiritual practice. The monastery is no longer a special building you must travel to. Your office, your kitchen, the supermarket, and the highway become your monastery. The meditation cushion is an excellent place to train the mind, a gymnasium for building your spiritual muscles. But the real test, the championship game, is played out in the messiness of your daily life. A traffic jam is no longer a frustrating delay. It is a 10-minute, unannounced meditation retreat. A difficult family dinner is no longer an ordeal to be endured. It is an advanced seminar in compassion and skillful speech. You are never not practicing. Every moment is an opportunity to watch the mind, to choose kindness, to let go of a grievance, to breathe. There is no wasted time in a life that is viewed as a continuous lesson. The ultimate embodiment of this principle is found in the story of a bodhisattva enlightened being dedicated to helping all others named Sadaparibhuta, which translates as never disparaging. His sole practice was to honor the divine potential in every person he met. He would walk up to everyone, regardless of their station or character, monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, and he would bow to them deeply. As he bowed, he would say the same powerful words, "I dare not hold you in contempt, for you are all practicing the path and are destined to become Buddhas." He did this with everyone, without exception. Most people, however, did not understand. They were insulted. They thought he was being insincere or mocking them, by predicting something so lofty for them. They would scold him, curse at him, and even attack him, beating him with sticks and throwing stones at him. Sadaparibhuta's response to this abuse was extraordinary. When they would chase him away, he would run to a safe distance. But even as he was running, he would turn and shout back his praise. "I dare not disparage you. You will all become Buddhas." He never wavered in his practice. He was not just being polite or practicing some form of blind optimism. He was engaged in a profound act of seeing. He trained himself to look past the surface level, conditioned personality, the anger, the ignorance, the arrogant sand, to see directly into the fundamental nature of each person, their inherent potential for perfect wisdom and compassion, their Buddha nature. He was interacting not with their temporary ego, but with their timeless, true self. In doing so, he not only planted seeds of awakening in them, but he purified his own mind to such a degree that he himself realized a high state of enlightenment. He saw the teacher, the potential Buddha, in everyone, even in those who were actively causing him harm. This practice leads to the final, and perhaps most surprising, stage of this transformation: the cultivation of gratitude for our challenges. This is not a masochistic love of pain, but a clear-eyed recognition that our greatest growth comes from our greatest difficulties. Smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. It is the storm that teaches us how to navigate. A weightlifter is grateful for the heavy weights because they understand that the resistance is precisely what builds their strength. In the same way, we can learn to feel a sense of gratitude for the difficult people and painful situations in our lives, because they are the very resistance that builds our spiritual muscle of patience, our resilience, our compassion, our wisdom. This perspective performs a powerful alchemy. It transforms the poison of resentment into the medicine of gratitude. It reframes the story of your life from a series of unfortunate events you have endured into a meaningful curriculum designed for your own awakening. With every challenge, a necessary and valuable lesson from a master teacher. When every moment becomes a practice and every encounter becomes a teacher, the distinction between life and spiritual path dissolves. The search for a special state or a future enlightenment begins to fall away. All of these tools, these parables, these shifts in perspective are not meant to lead to a final, explosive destination. Rather, they cultivate a new way of being in the world, moment by moment. They lead to a state of profound, yet ordinary, peace that is not dependent on circumstances. This is the culmination of the path, not a frantic arrival, but a simple and serene return home to a state of peaceful abiding. When every moment becomes a practice and every encounter becomes a teacher, the distinction between life and spiritual path dissolves. The search for a special state or a future enlightenment begins to fall away. All of these tools, these parables, these shifts in perspective are not meant to lead to a final, explosive destination. Rather, they cultivate a new way of being in the world, moment by moment. They lead to a state of profound, yet ordinary peace that is not dependent on circumstances. This is the culmination of the path, not a frantic arrival, but a simple and serene return home to a state of peaceful abiding. This is the great secret of the spiritual journey. We imagine we are travelers, venturing out to find something we lack, a treasure called peace in a distant land. But the path eventually leads us back to the one place we started, to our own heart, our own mind, our own breath. The journey is not one of acquisition, but of uncovering. The peace we seek was never lost. It was merely buried beneath the noise and agitation of an untrained mind. All the practices we have explored, identifying the restless monkey mind, acknowledging the reality of unease, anchoring ourselves in the breath, understanding the wisdom of impermanence and non-self, avoiding the second arrow, cultivating compassion, walking the middle way, and seeing the teacher in every moment are simply tools for clearing away the debris. They are methods for sweeping the floor of the mind so we can see the beautiful foundation that was there all along. The peace of this abiding is not what many of us imagine. It is not a mind that is completely blank, empty of all thought. That would be an unnatural and useless state. Rather, it is a mind that is no longer disturbed by the thoughts that pass through it. The perfect metaphor is the ocean. On the surface of the ocean, there can be great turmoil. Waves rise and fall, storms rage, winds blow, and the water churns. This is like the surface of our minds, with its daily traffic of thoughts, emotions, plans, and worries. A person who lives only on the surface is tossed about by every wave, constantly reacting to every change in the weather. But if you descend deep into the ocean, you find a place of profound stillness. Even during the most violent hurricane, the great depths remain silent, calm, and undisturbed. To cultivate peaceful abiding is to learn to identify not with the turbulent waves on the surface, but with the vast, silent depths of your own being. The waves of thought will still come and go. The storms of difficult emotions may still blow, but they happen on the surface. You remain rooted in your own deep, inner quiet. You contain the storm without becoming the storm. Another way to see this is to imagine that your fundamental awareness is like the sky vast, open, clear, and limitless. Your thoughts and feelings are like the clouds that pass through the sky. Some clouds are white and fluffy and pleasant to look at. Others are dark and menacing, full of thunder and rain. The clouds are constantly changing, drifting in and drifting out. But no matter how dark or stormy the clouds become, they never stain or damage the sky. The sky remains untouched. It allows the clouds to be there, to do what they do, and to pass on in their own time. Peaceful abiding is the realization that you are the sky, not the clouds. When a thought of anxiety arises, you see it as just a dark cloud passing through the sky of your awareness. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to believe it. And you don't have to identify with it. You simply let it be, knowing that your true nature, the vast open sky of consciousness, is perfectly safe and unharmed. This profound state of being is illustrated beautifully in a story about an old Zen master who lived a simple life on a mountain. A seeker, having heard of the master's great wisdom, made a long journey to find him. He found the master simply sitting and looking at the trees. The seeker asked, "Master, what is the secret to your peace? What do you do here all day?" The master replied, "I sit, I walk, I eat." The seeker, confused, said, "But master, everyone sits and walks and eats." The old master smiled gently and replied, "Yes, but when they sit, their mind is walking. When they walk, their mind is eating. When they eat, their mind is sitting somewhere else. When I sit, I just sit. When I walk, I just walk. When I eat, I just eat." This is the practice of peaceful abiding in action. It is the end of the inner division that causes so much of our stress. It is being fully present for the life that is right in front of us. The joy and peace is found not in achieving some future state of bliss, but in the simple act of chopping wood and carrying water with our full attention. The sacred is discovered in the ordinary. The destination is the journey itself. moment by moment. This is not, however, a static state to be achieved once and for all, like a trophy placed on a shelf. It is a lifelong practice, a path we must choose to walk every single day. There will be days when the mind is turbulent and we forget we are the ocean. There will be days when we mistake ourselves for the storm clouds. This is part of being human. The practice is not about achieving perfection. It is about becoming more and more skilled at remembering. It is about gently, and without judgment, coming back home, again and again and again, with every conscious breath, with every mindful step. We return to the peace that is our true nature. This state of peaceful abiding, this simple, profound presence, is the fruit of the entire path. It is where all the teachings converge. The journey that began in the dark night of a restless mind has led us full circle, back to the simplicity of a single breath, a single step, a single moment. It is not an end, but a new beginning, a new way of living. And so, let us now gather these threads, look back upon the path we have traveled, and distill the core message that can empower us to walk it with confidence and grace. We began this journey together in the dead of night, in that quiet, lonely hour of 3 in the morning, where the only thing louder than the silence is the storm within our own mind. We began as a prisoner, trapped by a relentless barrage of thoughts, regrets, and anxieties. From that place of quiet desperation, we have traveled far. We gave a name to our tormentor, the restless monkey mind, and in naming it, we began to see it not as our very self, but as a conditioned pattern of activity. We learned that the unease we feel is not a personal failing, but a fundamental part of life, a first noble truth that, when faced honestly, becomes a doorway to freedom rather than a life sentence of suffering. We discovered that we hold within our own body a perfect, portable anchor to the present moment, the breath. We learned not to fire the second arrow of self-inflicted suffering, to cultivate the healing warmth of compassion for ourselves and others, and to set down the heavy burdens of yesterday and tomorrow. We saw that everything we cling to, including our thoughts and even our sense of a solid self, is impermanent, and in that wisdom, we found a profound invitation to let go. The final message of this journey is not that you must become a Buddhist or a monk or anything other than what you already are. The timeless wisdom shared here is not a religion to be adopted, but a set of tools to be used, a mirror to be looked into. The core message is this: the peace you have been seeking is not outside of you. It is not waiting for you in a new job, a new city, a new relationship, or at the bottom of a shopping bag. The frantic, external search for peace is the very activity that keeps it at bay. True, lasting peace is an inside job. It is a skill you can cultivate, a muscle you can strengthen. It is the simple, radical result of changing your relationship with your own mind. Peace is the quiet, spacious awareness that holds your thoughts. It is the silent sky that allows the clouds to pass. It is the space between your thoughts, a space that has always been there, waiting for you to notice it. And so, we leave you here, at the beginning of your own path, with a sense of empowerment. You are not helpless before the onslaught of your own thinking. You are not a victim of your own mind. You now have the tools, the maps, and the wisdom of countless others who have walked this path for over 2.5 millennia to guide you. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Start there. Start small. Start with a single, conscious breath. Tonight, when you lie down to sleep, if the storm of thought begins to gather, try something new. Instead of fighting it, instead of wrestling with the thoughts, simply watch them. See them as clouds drifting through the vast sky of your mind. Feel the gentle, steady rhythm of your breath in your body, and let that be your anchor. Peace is not the absence of the storm. It is the quiet at the center of the storm. And that center, that peaceful, silent core, is always and already within you.